Chapter 18. Elements at Play. 4:40 p.m. Friday, 12 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. Here, and here, Andy stated. After pulling his wand back, he looked at Harry and cocked an eyebrow. Harry carefully examined the map of the preserve, and in particular, the three glowing red dots positioned just in the ocean. They looked about right, exactly where they'd found the entrances to the three tunnels that led to the three weirs. That looks right to me, Harry nodded. It's gotta be an animal then, Charlie stated. Too small for a human, and a person couldn't tunnel in the sand like that for that distance without it collapsing. But what animal, though? Sharon asked. None that I know of, magical or mundane. Silence was her only response, and with good reason none of them had come up with any answer, no matter how much research had been done. At this point, Harry doubted Evenut could answer the question. The only good news we have is that last weir is a lot further from the ocean, Bruce stated. True, but does that mean that it's safe? Mick asked. Could just take a while longer for whatever's doing this to tunnel that far. We need to keep those eggs safe, Andy stated. This is the first clutch of eggs we've had here for quite a few years, and you all know that these are the only opal-eyed dragons in the world. As dragon keepers, it's our responsibility to keep them safe and to help them prosper. Harry, can the dragons help us find what's doing this? Charlie asked. Harry shook his head in frustration. I don't think so. Yes, they've got a flight of half a dozen dragons watching over the weir and the eggs 24/7. But if whatever's taking the eggs is coming up from underground, and the dragons can't sense whatever it is either which they are most annoyed about, then I doubt that there's a lot that they can do to safeguard them. Even if we were there watching as well, which there's no guarantee the dragons would allow, I don't overly like the idea of simply reacting to the eggs getting taken. Andy frowned. Even if we got there as soon as it happened and used young Harry's wind ability to flush the animal out, the chances of the eggs getting damaged is too high. Andy's right. We need to find this thing and catch it before it reaches the eggs, Bruce said. How, though? The thing tunnels. Even assuming that it's starting from the ocean like the other three tunnels, it could be coming from anywhere. And there's no guarantee that it's coming in a straight line either. It could be circling for all we know. Sharon stated, clearly frustrated. Then what do we do? Jess, the lone apprentice attached to the preserve, asked. We can't let those eggs be taken. What we really need is to come up with a way to trap it before it can take the eggs. I just can't see how at the moment, Andy stated. I am open to ideas. Did someone say something about wanting to set a trap? Harry spun at the extremely interested-sounding voice to find an eager-looking Sirius standing just inside the door, Remus right alongside him. I think we've just found our answer. Charlie laughed. Gentlemen, ladies, let me introduce you to two of the marauders of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The pranks these guys pulled during their school years are still legendary after all this time. Hey, it wasn't that long ago, Sirius retorted. I am not sure what you're talking about, but if you're wanting to set a trap for someone or something, then we might be able to come up with a few ideas, Remus stated. At this point in time, I'll take anything, Andy said. Come on over and well explain what we know. 0v06:05 a.m. Saturday, 13 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia. There was barely a click when the door closed, and Harry breathed a sigh of relief. While neither Sirius nor Remus were light sleepers, he hadn't wanted to take the chance of waking them, especially not with how late they'd gone to bed the night before. Admittedly, Harry was up just as late, but he'd always been an early riser. A decade of waking early to cook breakfast for his family had ensured that he'd never be able to sleep in, no matter how hard he tried. But being awake this early meant that he could finally do something that he'd been missing: see the sunrise from his broom a few hundred yards up. Ramaranth, Grulith, Memzath, and the fledglings might be half a world away, but there were dragons here, and he could get lucky enough to have some company. Dawn wasn't long past when he took to the sky. Harry couldn't help but look around while he flew. It was so different here, nothing like Romania or even Scotland where he'd flown before. The land here near the coast was fairly flat, with only small hills undulating across it, very different from what he was used to. There were mountains here, but so far in the distance as to be nearly impossible to see, and the most puzzling part of those mountains was their color. Blue, not green or brown or capped in white, but blue. Movement out at sea diverted Harry's attention, and he turned his broom that way, accelerating straight across the preserve. Could whatever's been taking the eggs be a sea dweller? Below him, he noticed dragon heads turn upwards, but he ignored them, instead keeping his eyes focused. It wasn't a wave, of that he was certain. The way that it arched its back out of the water had his eyes widening. Whatever it was big. And then he saw a huge tail emerge, stand upright for a moment before slapping straight down, sending up a spray of water. "Is that a whale?" he exclaimed. He'd never seen a whale before. Unsurprising, really, considering his time here in Australia was the first time that he'd ever seen the ocean before. Nothing could stop him from flying on, as eager as he was to get a closer look. His eyes scanned the water even as he shot past the beach and headed straight out over the ocean. Another whale breached, or was it the same one? Its back rising above the surface of the water, a jet of air shooting straight up as it breathed, and Harry gasped. It was big, huge even. He could only laugh at his ridiculous thought that this was what had dug the tunnels and taken the eggs. "I greet you, speaker. Are you here to break your fast?" Harry's head shot to the side to find an opali flying beside him, its head in line with his broom. There was a scar that led from the dragon's lower jaw and partway down its neck that made Harry frown. What could hurt a dragon's hide? Unless it had happened as a fledgling when the hide was still soft. "Good morning," Harry replied. "I'm sorry, I don't know your name." "I am Zanzin, speaker," the dragon replied. "It's nice to meet you, Zanzin," Harry replied. "Are you here to break your fast, speaker?" Zanzin repeated. "No, I just enjoy flying and watching the sun come up," he replied. And the whales caught my attention. I've never seen any before. Even as he looked back out and down, he saw not one, but whales breaching. The second one, though, was much, much smaller than the first, a baby, and it was swimming very close to its mother. Before he could comment on it, another whale appeared. This one, though, was different. For a start, Harry could see it underwater before it breached, even in the low light. For another, it was pure white. "A white whale," Harry exclaimed. "Migaloo," Zanzin said. Harry spared a second to glance at his flying companion before focusing on the strange whale once again. "I am sorry, I don't know that word," he said. "Migaloo," Zanzin repeated it, "is the word that the two-legs use whenever they see this whale. They always get quite animated when it appears, although we do not know why. It's just a whale." "Migaloo," Harry repeated, rolling the word around. Could it be the whale's name? "I do not know, speaker." Then, without warning, Zanzin's entire body tipped up and then straight down. Harry watched, alarmed, as the dragon's wings folded up tight against its body. It plunged faster and faster, straight down towards the water. Harry had no idea what to do. He didn't think that they were high enough for the dragon to pull out of its dive before it hit the water. Still, that didn't stop him from willing Zanzin's wings to open. But it never happened. Instead, Zanzin plunged straight into the ocean below. Its body was so straight that there was hardly any splash at all. Instantly, Harry dove down after it, his eyes searching the water below. But before he could drop very far, Zanzin re-emerged, flying out off the water, its great wings flapping hard to gain altitude. Water poured from its body and Harry scanned it, searching for damage, but there was none that he could see. It was only when Zanzin once more reached Harry's height that he realized that there was something flopping around at the side of Zanzin's jaw. Before he could identify it, Zanzin jerked its head up. Its jaws flew open and 3 fish flew up, spun around and fell straight back to land in Zanzin's mouth. "Breakfast." Zanzin had asked about breakfast. Obviously, this was the dragon's breakfast. "Would you like a fish, speaker? I could catch one for you. They're quite delicious," Zanzin asked. "No, thank you, Zanzin. I am not hungry just yet, he replied. Unfortunately, when Harry next looked back to see the whales again, it was in vain. They'd moved on, possibly scared away by Zanzin's fishing expedition. Still, he'd gotten to see them, and it wasn't something that he was ever likely to forget. Especially if Hepenteth's morning scene. Zanzin emerging from the ocean, fish in its jaws, the whales off in the distance. He could see the image so clearly in his mind that his fingers itched to have a piece of chalk or a paintbrush in his hand. Painting, though, wasn't something that he had a lot of time for, not with the creature still out there and the eggs in danger. Although Zanzin, do you know if Dankram is awake yet? We have an idea to help keep Shicklin's clutch safe, but I need to speak to Dankram first to see if it's possible, he asked. Dankram is usually awake before the sun rises. Zanzin replied, if you are willing to wait until after I have caught a few more fish, I can take you to her. Of course, Harry smiled. He'd be very happy to wait. Eat your fill. With that, Zanzin rolled his body and dived for the water below once more. 0v01, 25 p.m. Saturday, 13 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. Harry Potter, I'd like you to meet Cohen Muriata, Andy introduced. Nice to meet you, sir, Harry said, shaking the older man's hand. Like Andy, Cohen was clearly a native of Australia. Unlike Andy, Cohen wassailed, ancient even. The lines that marked his face were deep and many, and his hair was a pure white, just like the few teeth that still remained in his mouth. Harry was also able to just about look the man in his eyes, but that was due more to the man's pronounced stoop rather than his actual height. Cohen. That's an unusual name, Remus said, also shaking the elder Aboriginal's hand. Harry shot his honorary uncle a look. Really? He thought Cohen was unusual considering his own name and his best friend's name. It means thunder in my language, Cohen replied. An apt name, considering Cohen's affinity for elemental magic, Andy explained. You can do elemental magic, Harry blurted. Cool. Cohen's eyes lit up even as he laughed. I hear that you can do it too, young Harry. So I am told, Harry replied. Really, I am not sure what I am doing. Well, that's why I am here. How about you and I go for a walk, and you can tell me what you've managed so far, Cohen suggested. At Harry's nod, the two of them started off towards the sand hills. Due to Cohen's slow pace, though, Harry was able to hear the tail end of Remus and Andy's conversation. Cohen is a master of wind and earth magics, and he has knowledge of fire and water magics as well, Andy was saying. If Harry pays attention, he can learn a lot from him. If I know Harry, he'll be soaking up anything he's taught like a sponge, Remus replied. Young Andy tells me this is your first time here in Australia, Cohen said, drawing Harry's attention back. What do you think of our land? It's amazing. Harry replied before clarifying, not that I've seen much yet, but the ocean and the dragons here are brilliant. And I saw some whales this morning, although Zanzin scared them away when he was fishing for his breakfast. Zanzin, one of yon dragons? Cohen asked, nodding at a pair of opal sunning themselves on the top of one of the sandhills not far away. Yep, Harry replied. I haven't met many, but they're all great. That's a rare gift you have there, being able to talk to dragons. Cherish it and use it well, Cohen said. I am doing my best, Harry replied. That is all anyone can do, Cohen nodded. He looked around at the area, nodded once more and gestured to the ground. Here looks as good a place as any. Harry waited until the ancient Aboriginal was seated before he sat as well. Noting that Cohen had crossed his legs, Harry copied him. Tell me, young Harry, what it is that you can do, Cohen said. Harry frowned, not entirely sure how to explain it. Still, he did his best, finding that he was often repeating words and phrases that he'd used with Sirius and Remus. I guess I tap into my magic. I sort of compress it like it's in a big bubble, and then I open the tiniest hole and let out a stream of my magic. But because it's such a small amount, and because it's my magic, I can use it to stimulate the air around me, and I guess, push there where I want it to go. He'd been looking down as he tried to explain and ended with a shrug. When he lifted his eyes, it was to find a broad grin on Cohen's face. "You are already far into your journey in this type of magic, young Harry," Cohen said. "You are instinctively shaping and directing your magic exactly as you need to. Please, show me." Harry'd guessed that this was coming, so had already begun pulling all of his magic towards himself and directing it down inside. Now that he was concentrating, he was able to find all of those loose tendrils of magic that inhabited his body and shape them into that dense ball that he was becoming used to. Interestingly, his magic seemed to almost gravitate into the right shape, and he wondered whether it was starting to get used to him doing this. Then, once it was compacted tightly inside him, Harry concentrated harder on his connection to it and carefully released a tiny gap. Instantly, his magic surged forth, and he was forced to wrestle it under control. As the magic burst forth, he directed it into the very air. Around him, the air began to dance, and Hepusha directing it in a circle around them before allowing it to spiral upwards. Their clothes were pulled about even as the breeze increased across their faces. "Wonderful!" Cohen clapped while laughing. "You are doing wonderfully." Harry allowed the wind-pushed magic to continue for another minute before corking his magic once again and allowing the wind and air to settle. "That is precisely what elemental magic of the air is," Cohen stated. "There is little that I can teach you." "You can't?" Harry asked, his hopes dashed. He was sure that Cohen was there to help him learn all that he could do and give him lots of lessons about how to do it. "There is no need," Cohen replied. "You are already on the path. Simply practice what you are already doing. Play with your ability. You will learn more that way than being taught by me." "If you say so," Harry replied, not exactly sure that he agreed. "Air magic is one of the easiest elements of nature to bend to your will and magic. The other elements are much harder," Cohen said. "Earth, water, fire, these are much harder to control. Wizards and witches have created spells that allow them to manipulate the elements, but that is not true elemental magic. Elemental magic is Felder." Cohen placed his hand against his chest, almost exactly where Harry knew his own magic pooled inside him. "And once felt, it can be manipulated. Not with words or spells, but simply through your own magic reaching out and doing your bidding, just like you did with the air." Harry nodded slowly. That made sense, and it did answer some of the questions that Harry had about the difference between normal magic and elemental magic. "Tell me, young Harry, have you ever used your magic without words, without spells to manipulate any of the other elements?" Cohen asked. His immediate reaction was to say no, but something stopped him. A feeling, a fragment of a memory. He frowned, searching for it, and then it blossomed into being. Tiny Professor Flitwick, the forbidden forest, and some candles. "Actually, I think I have," he said, looking up at Cohen with bewilderment. The elder beamed at him, his remaining teeth standing out starkly against his black skin. "Show me," Cohen instructed, gesturing to the world in general. Harry's eyes darted about, looking for something to use. A leaf, old and brown, lying a dozen yards away, gave him the inspiration that he needed. Carefully, he lifted his hand and willed his ball of light to appear. The light, as always, was without heat, an easy problem to solve. With a push, he sent it flying towards the leaf, adjusting its temperature as it traveled. When it reached its destination, he simply had it hover there even as he altered its heat some more. All of a sudden, the leaf burst into flames. Quickly, the fire licked from one end to the other before it slowly died out. Only then did Harry let his ball of light dissipate. Extraordinary. "And quite an unorthodox approach," Cohen exclaimed. Harry laughed. "That's exactly what Professor Flitwick said. And who might this Professor Flitwick be?" Cohen asked. "He's the charms professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He was teaching Mainsandi and wanted me to light a candle using my wandless magic. That was the only way that I could work out how to do it." Harry shrugged. "Truly exceptional," Cohen beamed. "It is easy to see that you have a true connection to your magic, one that many magicals fail to establish, to their detriment. While the element of fire isn't one that I have an affinity for, I think that, between us, We can find ways to fine-tune this ability of yours until you're ready to learn on your own. You think so? Harry asked eagerly. How do I start? You start the same way that you did when you wanted to manipulate the air. Young Harry, 0v0, 10:30 a.m. Sunday, 14 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia. GRRR. The growl was so low as to be nearly inaudible. That didn't stop the sound from penetrating straight into their very bones and causing every hair on their body to stand on end. Harry, are you sure about this? Sirius asked. Of course I am, Harry replied. They're just being overly dramatic. Doesn't sound dramatic at all. Sounds like a full-blown warning to me, Sirius countered, his voice much higher than usual. Harry looked at his godfather. The man was visibly shaking in his boots. His eyes were wide, and his head was jerking about, as though trying to keep every dragon perched on the top of the sandhills that surrounded the weir in view at all times. Clearly, Sirius' mouth was dry, for he was licking his lips every other second. He was petrified. Honestly, Harry wouldn't have been surprised if there had been a yellow puddle appearing on the sand at Sirius' feet. You do know that the British ministry had a bunch of teenagers entering a mother dragon's nest to retrieve an egg, don't you? And for entertainment at that? Harry asked, amused. They were idiots, all of them, Sirius exclaimed. Bet you'd never get one of them into a weir like this. And without me having first come to an agreement with the dragons themselves, if anyone even tried, they'd likely not survive the encounter, Harry stated. Why Arweher again? Sirius asked. Harry stared at him. This whole thing was Sirius' idea in the first place. It seemed that in his terror of actually doing it, he'd forgotten. We're here to put that piece of plastic in your hand under the clutch of eggs, Harry reminded him patiently. Sirius jerked his head down to the piece of plastic in question, stared at it for a moment, stared at the nest of eggs, and promptly resumed staring up and around at the 7 dragons watching them. Whoever came up with that idea was a complete lunatic, Sirius stated. Well, lunatic, shall we get to work? The sooner we're done here, the less nervous the dragons will be, Harry said. You know that they weren't keen on this idea at all, don't you? Don't remind me, Sirius said. What was it? If this plan fails, then they promise to roast me and eat me. Yep, that about sums it up, Harry grinned. Now, what do you want me to do? Once again, Sirius tore his gaze from the dragons and focused on the clutch of eggs. Can you lift the eggs? He asked. Harry nodded and concentrated. He'd been practicing this. None of the dragon handlers liked the idea of using a magical spell on a dragon egg, not even something as simple as Wingardium Leviosa. And the idea of pointing a wand at a nest of dragon eggs simply seemed a recipe for suicide. Instead, Harry concentrated on his inner magic. When it was ready, he let it out and let it settle into the sand. Sweat broke out on Harry's forehead as he mingled his magic with the sand and pushed the sand in a wave towards the eggs. Then it was a matter of forcing his magic-filled sand molecules down and under the clutch. He was forced to concentrate on his breathing, doing his best to ignore the pools of sweat on his forehead, the middle of his back, and under his arms. Earth elemental magic was not easy. Closing his eyes, Harry concentrated harder, pushing the sand so that it was completely under the nest. Then he forced the sand up. Slowly it rose. One end rippled, causing 2 of the eggs to wobble, and Harry was forced to compensate. Gradually, though, he succeeded. His magic-infused sand was floating a few inches above the ground, a layer of normal sand above it on which the eggs rested. Quickly, Sirius rushed forward and dropped to his knees. The piece of plastic was pushed in place so that it completely covered where the sand and eggs had been. Right, let it down, Harry, Sirius instructed. Carefully, Harry lowered the sand back into place and let his magic go. Looks exactly as it did before, he panted, running the back of his arm across his face. Thath had taken a lot out of him. Manipulating air and fire was much easier to do than earth. Good. Grab your broom and let's get out here, Sirius said. I don't like the way those dragons are looking at me. They're not looking at you any differently than they usually do, Harry replied, shaking his head. That's what worries me. Sirius retorted even as he shot into the air. Chapter 19. Articles and Letters. Monday, 15 August 1995, weekly column in Daily Prophet. Seeing is believing. The Antipodean Opelebi Harry Potter, for those of you who were either there for or perhaps read about or saw magical photos of the dragons at the first task of the Triwizard tournament last year. You would have seen 4 different types of dragon: the Hungarian horntail, the Chinese fireball, the common Welsh green, and the Swedish short snout. One type of dragon that almost no one has seen before in the British Isles is the Antipodean opeli. Over the last few days, I've had the opportunity to visit with this rare and wonderful type of dragon at their home in the Australasian Dragon Preserve, the only place in the world that they can be found. I can attest that they truly are incredibly stunning. Their pearl-colored scales, which perfectly reflect the sunlight, do an amazing job of helping them stay hidden, as they can blind anyone who sees them from the wrong angle. But their most distinguishing feature are definitely their eyes. Unlike us, or pretty much all animals, opelis don't have pupils. Instead, their entire eye is like a great opal, hence their name. The truly remarkable thing about their eyes is not just how many colors that they can produce, but what those colors mean. For most of us, body language helps us to understand what the other person is saying. That's not so easy when you're talking with a being that's so much bigger and more impressive than you are. Thankfully, there are ways to understand dragons, too, even for people who can't speak to them as I do. From my talks with some of the opelis, most especially the Weir leader, Dankrum and Cantrum, the first of the opelis that I got to meet, I've seen how the colors of their eyes reflect exactly what the dragons are thinking and feeling, something that I've not seen or heard of that anyone else, man or creature, can emulate. But it's not just their eyes that make these dragons so brilliant. Sitting on your broom as you hover above the ocean, as you get to watch the dragon who's flying beside you simply fold in his wings and plunge into the water below, before re-emerging with 2, 3 or more fish in his mouth, his breakfast, is a sight that I know that I will forever cherish. If ever you get the chance to visit Australia, make sure that you visit my friends in the Australasian Dragon Reserve, both dragon and human. I guarantee that it's something that you'll remember for the rest of your life. 0v010:00 a.m. Tuesday, 16 August 1995, Wisengamot Chambers, Ministry of Magic, London, England. Hear ye, hear ye. This 14th session of the Wisengamot in the year of 1995 is called to order. All members are expected to have taken their seats. The shuffling and susurration that had been sweeping the great rooms ceased with the herald's announcement. "Scribe, are you prepared to fulfill your duties?" Chief Warlock Dumbledore asked the traditional question. The scribe, young Percy Weasley, didn't even blink at the question. His parchment already lay under his hand, his quill inked up and poised. "I am," he replied. Augusta Longbottom swept her eye over the sea of plum robes that made up her peers. She held no hopes that this meeting would be any different from any of the last few dozen that Shed attended. The agenda was well known, and the motion had already been set for more of the same. There were days like today when she looked forward to the time when her grandson came of the appropriate age to take his rightful seat, the one that she currently sat proxy for, and when she could retire to her leisure. A soft gong snapped her head to the side, as it did for every head in the room. Augusta blinked at the sight of Lord Cyrus Greengrass standing, waiting for recognition. "Lord Greengrass, this is most unorthodox," Chief Warlock Dumbledore stated with what Augusta thought could be the hint of a frown. "I understand that Chief Warlock and I apologize for the interruption to the regular agenda, but this could not be helped. It is a matter of procedure that must take precedence," Lord Greengrass stated, instantly causing a murmur to sweep the hall. "Please elaborate," Chief Warlock Dumbledore said, sitting slightly forward in his chair. "5 days ago, I received a letter that must be acted upon within these very walls," Lord Greengrass stated. "I ask for your indulgence and permission to read out the appropriate section." Augusta's eyes snapped to Dumbledore. Only the fact that she'd known the man for so many decades and had sat in these very chambers with him for so many years allowed her to see the look of annoyance cross the man's face. It was incredibly brief, gone in an instant, but it was there. Dumbledore, she knew, liked to be in control of everything. Anthus was something new, something that he didn't know about, and someone having knowledge or doing something that he knew nothing of was something that she knew Dumbledore would not like. Please, the Chief Warlock said, waving a hand in Greengrass' direction. Lord Greengrass picked up a piece of parchment. No, Augusta corrected, her eyes narrowing. Paper. Muggle paper. At least, she thought that it was, her eyes not being as good as they once were. As you are aware, I was kept from the magical world for most of my life, Lord Greengrass read, and Augusta felt her heart speed up. And even since my return, it's taken quite some time for me to begin understanding the roles and responsibilities that come with the legacy of being the last of the Potter line. Augusta leant forward. Her eyes sought out, found and held the eyes of Amelia Bones. She too looked stunned. Stunned and hopeful. Was this what they'd been wanting, what they'd been hoping for? It is my understanding that, as head of the Potter line, there is a hereditary seat waiting for me to take up within the Wisengamot. Unfortunately, I did not understand this when I accepted and signed the contract between myself and the dragon reserves of the world. Of course, the laws within the Wisengamot would preclude me from sitting in my seat anyway, until I am 21, regardless of the fact that I am emancipated. However, that does not mean that I should not take an active and interested role, as my duties as head of the most ancient and noble house of Potter declare that I should. It is my understanding that my seat is currently being filled by a person by the name of Elphias Doge. Instantly, all eyes within the chamber snapped to the man in question, who was looking quite uneasy, his mouth moving, his eyes big and round, as he stared between Lord Greengrass and Chief Warlock Dumbledore. A man that I have never met or corresponded with. I feel that it is only right that I put my faith and trust in a person that I know and respect to sit in the seat of the most ancient and noble house of Potter as proxy, until I come of the correct age to take my place within that noble gathering myself. Therefore, Lord Cyrus Greengrass, knowing you to be a man of integrity and someone that I can respect and look up to, I ask that you represent me as proxy within the Wisengamot for the most ancient and noble house of Potter. Augusta sat back in her chair and stared. He'd done it. Sirius Black had actually done what was expected of him. While the letter had been penned by young Harry, there was no doubt in Augusta's mind that it had been dictated to him by Sirius Black of all people. How unexpected. But then, on second thought, knowing Black as she did, doing the unexpected was more often the expected with him than not. Deliberately, Augusta stopped that line of thinking, trying to understand what Sirius Black was thinking, or what he was likely to do, was enough to drive anyone mad. Around her, the Wisengamot had erupted. People were talking a mile a minute to their neighbors, or even to members further away. And in the middle of it all, old Elphias Doge simply sat there, obviously too stunned to speak. Boom, boom, boom. Dumbledore's cannon blasts quiet the room, sending members back to their seats. This is incredibly unorthodox, Chief Warlock Dumbledore stated. While the letter you possess certainly sounds genuine, we will require proof that this is indeed young Harry's wishes. Perhaps the next time he's in Britain, he can speak to this wizened assemblage himself. Lord Potter has affixed the seals of his rings to the bottom of this letter, as well as a sampling of his blood, which can be checked to see that it was indeed penned by him, and that he did so under no compulsions, Lord Greengrass stated. Dumbledore stared at the man. Very well, we will have it verified immediately. And then something must have occurred to the Chief Warlock, for he seemed to freeze in place for a moment. My apologies, Lord Greengrass, he said. Did you say rings? Indeed, I did. Lord Greengrass replied with what Augusta could see was one of those smiles that true Slytherins seem to like to wear when they saw someone realize that they'd finally caught on to a game that they were playing, and that person had just realized that the Slytherin had the upper hand. There is more to the letter, if I may. Augusta, like all those there, instantly leant forward, eager to hear what was to come next. I am unsure whether you are aware of this or not, but I am not the head of one most ancient and noble house but two. I am also head of the most ancient and noble house of Peveril. It is my understanding that there is also a hereditary seat within the Wisengamot for that house as well, although it currently does not have a proxy. It is my wish that you also sit in proxy for the most ancient and noble house of Peveril within the Wisengamot. If Augusta thought that the Wisengamot had reacted before, it was nothing as to the explosion of sound and mayhem that announcement had caused. Purple-robed members everywhere were on their feet, talking and gesturing to all and sundry. Dumbledore couldn't have looked more shocked, his mouth hanging slightly open as he sat back in his chair, his eyes firmly fixed on Lord Greengrass. Lord Cyrus Greengrass, a known neutral. A hard but fair man who, while not always liked, was respected for his stance on upholding wizarding laws and traditions and what was best for their society. He had morals, and he stuck to them no matter what. For him to gain the proxy for two additional seats, two most ancient and noble seats in addition to his own, was seriously going to affect the known power blocks. He had just become one of the most powerful men in the room. Augusta looked across at Amelia and returned the nod. The two of them would be having afternoon tea together, that was assured. Dumbledore's power base had been weakened. It might finally be time to make the moves that they'd been waiting for. The doors opening into this arena wasn't completely unexpected. The person who walked in was. Augusta hadn't seen the woman in years. Unsurprising, really. After all, the woman had been cast from her family, and therefore to the fringes of their society over a decade before. "Excuse me," Andromeda Tonks said, "I have a letter here from Lord Sirius Black of the most ancient and noble House of Black. He asked me to read it to you today." Augusta could only shake her head. Sirius Black. The man lived on mayhem, and especially creating it for others. She may never have liked the pranks that he pulled, and especially the ones that Frank had been a part of, but there were definitely days when he made life a lot more interesting than one would otherwise have expected. 0v0, 7:10 p.m. Tuesday, 16 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia. Dinner had been in full swing for a while now. Normally, it was a boisterous affair with lots of stories both from the day's work, as well as some that less tame laughter and teasing. Tonight, as with the last couple of nights, tension permeated everything. Everyone was on edge, waiting for something that they both hoped would never come, and something that they needed to happen. The trap. It was set. Ready. The slightest touch of the plastic that Sirius had placed underneath Shicklin's eggs would be enough to set it off. The dragons, they all knew, were watching. Not that there was much that Harry, Andy, or any of the dragon handlers thought that they could do against a predator that invaded from underground, but they were on guard regardless. It was a race, really, to see which would happen first, the trap being sprung or the eggs, the fledglings, hatching. And with there still being a couple of weeks until the latter was expected, the scales were definitely tipped towards the first. "Weasley, got something here for you," Sharon called as she walked through the lodge's door. Not just Charlie's head, but also those of Harry, Sirius, and Remus, who were sharing the table with him, all looked up and around. "Came in by Albatross," Sharon continued, waving a thick piece of folded, sealed parchment in the air. "Albatross," Charlie repeated. "Who be sending me an international letter?" "Alexander," Harry guessed. "Possible but unlikely," Charlie replied. "Not Marley?" Sirius asked, looking queasy, not that Harry could understand why. "I didn't know you knew my mother," Charlie said, sounding incredibly surprised. "I met her and Arthur once back when the war was on," Sirius replied. "They came with Fabian and Gideon to an event. Your mother got it into her head that she needed to matchmake me some cousin of hers." "That's right," Remus exclaimed. "I remember that now. What was her name?" "Anna." "Althea," Sirius corrected. "Not exactly my type. There was an age gap." I thought that my godfather was a ladies' man who wouldn't judge women on something as little as a few years' age difference. Harry grinned. Serious eyes narrowed. A few years. 17 is not a few, and she had a better mustache than me. Charlie stared at the man before finally pulling himself out of the conversation with a shake of his head. In answer to your question, no, it's not from Mum. For one thing, it's not red. Harry shuddered. He'd had his fair share of howlers back at Hogwarts and never wanted to experience another one again. They watched as Charlie cracked the seal, unfolded the letter, and then read it through. His jaw dropped, and Harry was sure that he was reading it through a second time. Well, that was unexpected, he finally said, dropping the letter to the table. What is it? Remus asked. Go ahead, Charlie said, waving at the parchment. Dear Mr. Weasley, Remus read aloud. Daughters, you are no doubt aware. Great Britain is the home for two distinct dragon species, the common Welsh green and the Hebridean black. Both of these dragon types live scattered throughout the Isles in small pockets of secluded areas. Whilst the Ministry of Magic has always done its utmost to ensure that our dragons are protected from both magicals and muggles alike, we feel that we can do more. To this end, a committee was formed last year to investigate our dragon population and their needs. Recently, that committee was upgraded to sub-department status, with a mandate for doing everything within our powers to protect and preserve our dragon population. We have already purchased an island within the Shetland Islands and are having it warded with the very best wards imaginable to hide it from the muggles and to ensure that the dragons there will be looked after. This island will be the new dragon reserve of Great Britain. We anticipate locating and moving all of the dragons within Great Britain to the reserve within 6 to 12 months. Your name was recommended to us as a British-born dragon handler with a great deal of experience. We understand that you are close to attaining your beast mastery, which makes you the perfect candidate to offer you the role of head dragon handler of the Dragon Reserve of Great Britain. This position comes with a lucrative stipend, traveling costs to relocate from your current assignment, and all of the tools and finance that you would need to build our Dragon Reserve into the best reserve in the world. We would, of course, immediately sign off on your beast mastery upon your signing of a contract with us. We look forward to your owl and would be very happy to answer any questions that you have. Mathilda Grimble, Hawkshare of the Sub-Department for the Regulation and Monitoring of the Dragons of Great Britain. What? Harry asked, breaking the silence that had descended over not just their table, but also the two adjacent tables as well. Yeah, that was my thought, Charlie said. A new reserve, Andy whistled. Impressive, and long overdue, especially if it'll get the dragons in Britain somewhere safe. Are you going to accept? Charlie looked up at him. No, don't get me wrong, it's a great offer, extremely flattering, but it certainly doesn't feel right. They'd sign off on my mastery straight away. No way. I've still got more to learn, and I want my mastery to mean something. Glad to hear it, Andy nodded, clapping Charlie on the back, echoing the murmurs from the other dragon handlers in the room. We may be called dragon handlers and get paid for what we do, but we're here to ensure the dragons can live their lives free from harm or interference, not to serve politicians. Harry nodded in agreement, even as his mind wandered to the dragons in Great Britain. They'd all be rounded up and moved from their homes to somewhere new, and Harry had a suspicion that they weren't going to like that. Hey, Charlie, he asked as a thought occurred. If there's a new dragon reserve, will we need to add that to the roster for reserves that I visit? Is the Dragon Reserve of Great Britain on your contract? Charlie asked. No. Then there's your answer, Charlie stated. 0v09, 30 a.m. Wednesday, 17 August 1995, Longbottom Manor, Bursay, England. Amelia had not long arrived to visit with her friend Augusta when they were interrupted. The tray with the teapot, cups and plate of biscuits had barely been placed on the coffee table when the Longbottom's house elf, Trinny, had peppered away, and then back again moments later. Mistress, there be a Mrs. Andromeda Tonks at the door to see you, the tiny being said. Amelia raised her eyebrow at the statement. That was unexpected, to say the least. Not quite as unexpected as the events of the day before, but still. Amelia knew that the odds of the two events being unrelated were quite low. Please show her in, Trinny, Augusta instructed. The two of them waited patiently. After all, a few more minutes before they could begin discussing the latest happenings was very little, especially considering that the Wisengamot session had lasted much longer than anticipated, meaning that their meeting was already half a day later than expected. Thank you for seeing me, Andromeda said, appearing in the doorway before pausing, obviously taking in Amelia's presence. My apologies, I didn't realize that you have company. Please come in and join us, Augusta said, having risen from her chair to greet her guest. Are you certain? Andromeda asked, looking uncertain. Let me ask you this, Augusta said in response. Was your coming here your idea, or was it suggested by another? Andromeda blinked, a fact that gave Amelia all the answer that she needed. Actually, my cousin, Sirius, suggested that I should talk to you, Andromeda replied. Actually, to both of you. And knowing that reprobate, he left out some crucial details. Amelia smiled. I wouldn't be surprised, Andromeda laughed. Trinny, another cup, if you please, Augusta said into the air. But when a house elf appeared, it was with not one butler cups as well as an extra guest. Cyrus Greengrass, Augusta sighed. I should have guessed, Cyrus asked. After yesterday's stunt, it doesn't surprise me that Sirius Black is still manipulating events to cause as much havoc as possible, Augusta stated. Amelia couldn't help herself. She snorted in amusement, an act that she instantly regretted when both of the other women pinned her in their gazes. Do not sit there and act all innocent, Andromeda accused. Sirius may be my cousin, but if any one of us knows what he's like the most, it'll be you, Amelia Bones. You did date him once upon a time, and likely would have married the man if events had turned out differently, Augusta added. In response, Amelia simply sipped her tea, ensuring that she neither confirmed nor denied the accusation. Would I be right in thinking that we're all here because of Sirius Black? Cyrus asked. Most definitely, Amelia replied. In that case, would you care to enlighten me? Cyrus asked. All I had was a separate note, with the letter that Harry sent telling me that I should come here at my earliest convenience as soon after the Wisengamot session as I could. I received a similar one, Andromeda admitted. Cyrus, after the events of earlier this year, I would have expected that you would have been able to deduce the reasoning, Amelia replied. Cyrus blinked at her and she tipped her cup at him when she saw the light of understanding gleam in his eye. The second task. Dumbledore. Exactly, she nodded. I guess that also explains why Harry appointed me as his proxy for his seat on the Hogwarts Board of Governors as well, Cyrus mused. He did he? Augusta said, sounding more pleased than Amelia had heard her being in a long time. I am sorry, I don't understand, Andromeda said, shaking her head. Our esteemed headmaster has been playing very loosely with certain rules, laws, and people's lives, Amelia informed her. That little stunt yesterday of Sirius, I think we can all agree that that was pure Sirius Black. Regardless of it being Harry Potter's name on the letter, may just have been enough to start the quaffle rolling to enable us, or more specifically, me, in bringing Albus Dumbledore to heel. What do you have in mind? Cyrus asked, a glint of unadulterated pleasure in his eye. 0v0, 11:53 p.m. Wednesday, 17 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia, speaker. Harry bolted upright in bed, instantly wide awake. Not that he'd really been asleep. Speaker. He clapped his hands over his ears, even though the roar was as much in his head as an audible sound. Speaker. His eyes widened as realization hit. It happened. The trap. The eggs. In an instant he was up and racing for the door. Chapter 20. What? 11:53 p.m. Wednesday, 17 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia, speaker. Harry bolted upright in bed, instantly wide awake. Not that he'd really been asleep. Speaker. He clapped his hands over his ears, even though the roar was as much in his head as an audible sound. Speaker. His eyes widened as realization hit. It happened. The trap, the eggs. In an instant he was up and racing for the door. The flicker of memory, one where this had happened before, and he raced out in just his pajamas pants in answer to a dragon call, even if this time he was wearing a shirt as well. It being winter here in Australia prompted him to remember the slap over the back of the head that he received for his recklessness. Thus, Harry thrust his hand behind him even as he kept moving forward. The feel of his wand slapping into his palm gave him hope that this time he wouldn't get in so much trouble. A vicious, ice-cold wind had him flinging his arm up to shield his eyes, even as the door to the cabin was all but ripped out of his hand. He blinked up at the black sky where the barest shapes of clouds swirled above. No, he realized, not clouds, and the sky wasn't starless. There were pinpricks of white up there. They were just overpowered by the multicolored glow of gleaming points of light every which way he looked. Lights with a decidedly red tinge. Eyes, dragon eyes, hundreds of them. The sky was filled with dragons. Every opali, it seemed, was hovering over the camp, their wings beating to keep them steady, the resulting downdraft rippling his clothes against him and whipping sand and every loose object into a frenzy. Speaker. The roar of the combined dragons was almost unbearably loud, and Harry winced, clapping his hands over his ears once again, a futile effort that did nothing when the noise seemed to be coming from inside his mind just as loudly as from outside his body. "I am here," he yelled. Vaguely, Harry recognized that there were others bursting from their own cabins, but he ignored them, his focus on the dragons above. Concentrating, he caused a ball of light to appear directly in front of him. A narrowing of his eyes had it doubling, tripling in size and intensity before he banished it to hover a meter above and in front of him. Now he could see. The ground around him burst into being as though it was daylight, not that Harry really noticed, his concentration fixed on dragons above him. Not that he could see much up there. Even squinting, it was hard to make out exactly which dragons were closest to him. The scales from their underbellies only enhanced and reflected the light that he projected. "Cantrum, Dankrum, where are you?" A dragon descended in front of him, his long, sinewy neck extended down, well past his lower legs to stare at Harry. "Zanzin," Harry said, recognizing the scar that extended down from the dragon's lower jaw to his neck. "Speaker, we need you," Zanzin stated. "I am here," Harry reassured him what's happened. "Is it the clutch?" "The clutch remains safe and untouched," Zanzin replied. "Did the trap work?" Harry asked excitedly. "We followed the taste of the magic," was Zanzin's only reply. Harry didn't wait, he ran. Bright, glittering, swirling eyes followed him as he raced through the camp and to the clearing where everything had been set up, his ball of light keeping pace, lighting his way. He was the first there. Well, first human, even though he was certain that the rest of the dragon keepers were on their way. The cage was surrounded, the flight of dragons swirling above it like a cyclone, keeping the cage as the eye of the storm. The fact that the cage was still there surprised Harry if, as he thought, that the culprit, the thief, had been caught. Then it wouldn't have surprised him if the cage had been burnt to ash in dragon fire and the thief along with it. But he asked then not to. Apparently, being the speaker and bearing the mark carried enough weight to stop dragon flame. Harry skidded to a stop a couple of meters out from the cage. What he saw had him staring, his wand automatically coming up to point, training on whatever it was. Soft thumps to either side of him told him that Cantrum and Dankrum had landed. What he asked, barely registering that he'd spoken. "The thief," Dankrum replied, disgust clear in her voice. The thief, whatever the name of its species was simply ugly. There was no other word for it. Never before had Harry seen anything like it. Not in person, not in a book. He hadn't even heard of anything like this ever described before. Size-wise, it was comparable to a Labrador, and while it did have 4 feet, a head and a tail, that was where the comparison ended. The thing was skeletal thin. As it passed the bars of the cage that confined it, it seemed to notice him, its black eyes boring into him. It shifted, allowing Harry to see that it had an incredibly thin front-on profile despite its boxy head. Its front legs especially looked powerful, ending with webbed feet, just like its rear feet. Its skin was a dark reddish-brown, not unlike mud, with only the hair on the back of its neck and tip of its tail being slightly lighter in color. What? Not even Sirius' question, announcing his arrival, could turn Harry's head from the bizarre creature. The creature's head moved, obviously taking in the newcomer, before shifting to look up through the bars to the hovering dragons. Its teeth, very long, very sharp teeth, were bared, and a deep, guttural growl sent shivers down Harry's spine. A heavy step that shook the ground had the creature backing up, its eyes now fixing on the approaching Dankrum. Instantly, it dropped its head, and its front paws began digging furiously at the ground. But they'd thought of that. This was a burrowing creature. It tunneled in under the weirs to reach the clutches. Thus, when this cage had been built, the floor was created using thick granite, something that only a dragon would have no trouble digging into. What? The question was being repeated more and more now as each dragon handler appeared. The fact that they did so, knowing that they'd have to walk under the flight of dragons bare meters above them to get to the cage, impressed Harry. There weren't many people on the planet who would have the courage to do that. And then the creature did something that none of them expected. Its body began to twist, bones cracked, sinews elongated, its very shape began changing even as it pressed its snout up against the bars. The creature was contorting itself into something even thinner, a shape that would allow it to push itself through the gaps in the bars. Quick! We need to plug those holes, completely seal the cage, Remus shouted. Instantly, men jumped forward, wands brandished. On one side, a stone wall was conjured. On another, the bars were transfigured, stretched, and turned into a solid mass. A golden shield appeared on a third side, pressed right up against the bars, allowing another to fill the gaps in the bars with sticks and stones, and anything else that was handy. But on the side that the creature was attempting to escape, they were hampered by the fact that the creature's snout was almost completely free. Instantly, Harry thrust his wand forward, sending a series of stinging hexes to impact right between the creature's eyes. A grunt of pain and flaring of its eyes didn't mean that it retreated at all. A second set, these ones deliberately overpowered, had it jerking backwards. The instant that it had retreated to the right side of the bars, Sirius conjured a glass wall. "That won't hold it," Harry commented. "Spelled unbreakable, it's not getting out of there in a hurry," Sirius replied. "Let us flame the beast," Dankrum hissed. Harry looked at her. Her eyes were swirling every shade of red, much of it so dark as to be almost unrecognizable as belonging to that color spectrum. "It deserves death," Cantrum agreed. To Ash, another added, "It does not even deserve the dignity of being food." "I understand how you feel, how all of you feel. I feel exactly the same," Harry told the combined dragons, looking around at them. "But we need to wait. Give us time to study the creature, learn about it, to make sure that there are no others around so that your clutches will be safe." "The speaker is wise," Dankrum allowed, the red in her eyes lessening the tiniest amount. "We must have patience, if only for our clutches yet to come." She swung her neck around then, her gaze switching from the caged creature to stare into Harry's. "But mark my words, speaker, this creature is marked for death, and only our respect for you is staying our flame. When you have learned all you can, it will be flamed. We are watching, and our patience is not endless." Harry nodded. "I understand, and agree." As one, Dankum and Cantrum leapt skywards, their wings beating hard as they ascended through the gap left by their brethren. Then as one, the dragons of the Australasian Dragon Preserve soared away towards their weirs. "What was that about?" Sirius asked. Harry looked at him. "The dragons aren't happy. They want a flame that whatever that is." "Bunyip, what?" Harry asked, spinning about. "Bunyip," Andy replied, stepping out of the shadows, the lines on his dark skin even more pronounced. "You mentioned that creature before," Remus commented. "I thought that they weren't real. They're a real to my people, Andy replied grimly. We've known about them for hundreds and hundreds of years. Just no one's seen them since long before white man came to this land. Harry glanced back at the now-named bunyip, watching as it paced backwards and forwards in its cage. To be fair, Andy said, scratching the back of his neck, Id thought that they died out years ago. Seems I was wrong about that. Did you know that it could contort itself, change its body shape like that? Remus asked, and Harry looked sharply at his adoptive uncle. There was something there, something in his voice. No, that's new, Andy replied, and explains a lot. Like how it was able to burrow in under the weirs in such a small hole to get the eggs, Charlie commented. What do you know about it? About bunyips? Harry asked. Not as much as any of us would like, Andy replied. I thought that they died out, remember? But one thing I do know is that I would never have expected a bunyip to be here. Their a natural habitat is a billabong. A what? Sirius asked. Billabong, water hole, Andy replied. Maybe a river or creek or a swamp. But the ocean never would have picked that. So what do we do with it now that we've caught the thing? Charlie asked. We study it and learn as much about it as we can, Remus replied, before eventually finding somewhere safe to release it. Somewhere far from here, Sirius nodded. No, Harry countered forcefully, shaking his head. That can't happen. Learn about it, yes. But release it? No, the dragons won't go for that. That thing took the eggs of 3 clutches and attempted to take the last clutch tonight. I've bought us some time to study the bunyip, but not a lot. Before too long, the dragons will be back to flame the bunyip, and nothing, not even I, will be able to stop them. Not that I really want to. The other 3 stared at him with a mixture of understanding and disappointment on their faces. Harry Remus began. No, Harry said, putting up his hand to stop what he knew Remus was about to say. I don't think any of us want to see what a flight of angry dragons can do if we try to defy them on this. 0v0. Thursday, 18 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia. What do you have there, pup? Without looking up, he raised a finger, bidding his godfather to wait. I really need you to come as quickly as you can. I don't know how long the dragons will wait. And even though this is the only bunyip that's been seen in hundreds of years, you'd have to think that there are more of them around. If we can learn enough from this one, well, you can see where I am going with it. So please, Newt, if you can, come and come quickly. Your friend, Harry. Satisfied, well, mostly, considering that he rambled somewhat in his haste to get the letter written, Harry folded the parchment, sealed it, and looked up and around. Thankfully, Sharon knew what he was doing and quickly caught his eye. Holding up the letter, she nodded and quick-stepped across to him. You think hell come? She asked, taking the letter from him. Harry nodded grimly. Hell come all right. There's no doubt about that. Whether hell get here in time is another question entirely. Newt Scamander, Sirius asked. But isn't he back home in jolly old England? Albatrosses are good, but even they're not fast enough to get to England that quickly. Want the dragons have roasted that bunyip before the letter even gets to him. If we were sending it by albatross, yeah, Sharon grinned. Sirius stared between her and Harry. Well, aren't you going to tell me? How are you sending it? He near exploded. Harry considered making his godfather wait. After all, even old dogs needed to learn new tricks or, in this case, patience. Sharon, though, seemed to have other ideas. It was Harry's idea. Bloody brilliant, if you ask me. House elf and portkey, she laughed before giving a final nod to Harry and darting off to begin the process of letter delivery. Harry, Sirius asked pointedly. When Harry simply smiled up at him, Sirius placed a box on the table between them before deliberately trapping the box under his hand. I was going to give this to you. A present that's finally arrived. But if you're going to be a bad little pup, then maybe you don't deserve it, he said lightly. Harry's eyes flicked from Sirius' face to the box. It was cubed and just a little longer than his godfather's hand on each side. A present. The concept was still a novelty for Harry, and he wondered what it could be. Exactly how am I being a how did you put it? A bad little pup. Harry asked, his eyes still fixed on the box. You're withholding pranking information, Sirius replied. Instantly, Harry's eyes darted up, almost as high as his eyebrows. Pranking? He wasn't pranking anyone. At least not right then, although he could think of someone who needed a good prank. Maybe the dragons would like to help. You, my dear pup, are pranking the postal service of the world, getting around the tried and true, established method of sending mail, Sirius explained. Harry hadn't considered it a prank, but then a marauder could usually smell a prank a mile away. Smell that gave Harry some more ideas, ideas the dragons would definitely be able to help with. Share or no present, Sirius stated, emphasizing his point by lifting the box slightly and lightly bumping it back onto the table. We're sending the letter with a house elf by Portkey, Harry shrugged. The house elf Skip only needs to get close enough to England, and then he can do his thing and pop straight to Newt and hand deliver it. Sirius stared at him for a full 30 seconds before throwing back his head and giving a great big barking laugh. Yep, that'd do it. Albatross would take too long. It's too far to flew, and even international portkeys need a couple of stops and are incredibly expensive. House elves would cut down on the time and cost. Well, make a marauder out of you yet. Suddenly, Sirius narrowed his eyes at his godson. Maybe we need to start your animagus training sooner rather than later. But I thought that Remus said Mooney is an old worrywart and can be too cautious for his own good at times. But that's a discussion for another time. Sirius waved away. Now, do you want your present or not? Harry nodded eagerly, his eyes instantly dropping back to the box. He watched excitedly as Sirius pushed it towards him. Thanks, Sirius, Harry said as he reached out and pulled the box towards him. The lid was a snug fit, and it took him a little bit of tugging before it finally parted with the rest of the box. His eyes bulged at the sight of the camera. It was an older style, bigger and boxier than its Muggle counterpart. Slowly, carefully, he lifted it out, barely noticing that the white, gel-like substance that it'd been sitting in lost its shape as he did so. It was mostly silver with black edging, and 3 small buttons set at the top. There's an instruction book, if you want to bother with it, Sirius said, turning the lid of the box upside down so that Harry could see the small book tied with ribbon to it. But really, all you need to know is look through that hole and press the button. There's 3 buttons, Sirius, Harry deadpanned. Right. Yes. Turn on the flash, take the picture and eject the film cartridge, Sirius replied, pointing to each one. To make the picture move, you simply develop it in a special potion the recipe's in the book, or you can buy it from a shop. Thanks, Sirius. Harry beamed. This is amazing. Now you can take all kinds of photos. Maybe even take some and send them with your newspaper articles so everyone back home can see what you're describing, Sirius suggested. That's a brilliant idea, Harry exclaimed. He often had the thought that, while he was getting to see his dragon friends in real life, the best that his human friends would see would be the pictures that he'd either drawn or painted. Yes, Daphne had got to meet Ramaranth and the fledglings and the other dragons in Romania, but she'd never meet any of the dragons here or wherever else he ended up. And Neville, Hermione and Susan would never get to see any of them at all. Sirius' newspaper article idea was good too. Just so long as he didn't, and you can even add some into that book that you and Newt are writing, Sirius said, finishing Harry's thought. I still say that it'll end up being a textbook one day. Harry ignored him, instead wrapping his hands around the camera and bringing it up to look through the viewfinder. He was sure that he could think of dozens of better uses for a magical camera than that, like getting a picture of Daphne the next time that he saw her, or taking a photo of a prank going off. Those ideas were really starting to flow, and he couldn't wait to see the result. See, not smell. 0v0, 12:55 Thursday, 18 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia. The danger may have passed, the culprit captured and contained, but that didn't mean that the dragons weren't still on watch. Most had returned to their weir or had gone fishing in the ocean, but there were still 3 full flights of dragons surrounding Shicklin's weir when Harry approached on his broom. He'd been flying slowly, at a height that would not be seen as threatening. He'd even made sure that he'd taken a leisurely arc from the handler camp to the weir, bypassing as many of the occupied weirs as possible without seeming to look as though he was trying to sneak up on the single weir that still contained the lone clutch of dragon eggs. Harry knew that he would have been seen long before any of the dragons that were sitting on the lip of the sand hollow that made up the weir took flight to join their brethren patrolling the skies above it. "Speaker, what do you hear at Shicklin's weir?" Dankram asked as she drew level with him, her head staying at the same height as him, even as her body undulated with the flap of her wings. "I wanted to make sure that all was well here," he replied. "May I land?" Dankram's answer was long in coming, and Harry was forced to slow to a near hover so that he didn't cross over the most precious of all the weirs. "You may," she finally replied. The gentlest of leans forward had Harry's broom taking him to the ground. Below, he could see Shicklin crouched protectively over her nest. Her wings were slightly unfurled, creating extra protection in an even wider circle around her eggs. "The eggs are safe?" Harry asked, even though he knew the answer. The bunyip never touched them at all, did it? "The protections you placed were well thought out. No harm or claw touched the fledglings to be," Dankram replied. "That's great." Harry grinned. "Those little dragons are going to be extremely special when they hatch." "It has been too long since fledglings flew these skies," Dankram agreed. "There will be more soon, won't there? The bunyip taking the other clutches won't stop your clan from having more babies, will it?" Harry asked. "No, there will be more fledglings in the next turn of the sun. Many of the females are already looking to that future," Dankram declared. "That's great." "I am really happy to hear that," Harry said. "I'm glad that we could help." Dankram looked away, and Harry had the impression that what she was thinking wasn't something that she was comfortable with. The yellow tinge to her eye only reinforced that notion. Finally, she turned back and curved her long neck around so that she was snout to face with Harry. "I thank you, Speaker for Dragons. You have taught us that not all two legs are bad." And while we knew this, trust was not something that we were willing to give, even to the two legs who look after this land where we wear. "Your mark was well given. All Opalais stand with you and will aid you for all time, wherever and whenever it is required," she declared. "You're a welcome, Dankram," Harry replied, his ears feeling hot with the embarrassment of the compliment. "And thank you. I am deeply honored just to have your friendship." "What of the thief?" Dankram asked. "We're learning everything that we can about it as quickly as we can," Harry replied hopefully. "In a couple more days, we'll know enough to always be able to detect them if they get close to the weirs again." "Agreed, Speaker," Dankram said, her head swinging back to look down into Shicklin's weir. "A pair of days, and then we will flame the thief as it deserves." Harry blinked. That wasn't what he meant. Not that he was going to argue. 2 days wasn't anywhere near enough. It was simply his best guess for when Newt might arrive and be able to start finding the answers to the mystery of Bunyip they were still looking for. The dragons, he knew, had already been more than generous with their patience as it was. 2 days it was. Chapter 21. Believe It or Not. Disclaimer: I solemnly swear that JKR owns everything Harry Potter. Whether or not I am up to no good with her characters is for you to decide. 0v0 Harry Potter. Dragon Whisperer Chapter 21. Believe It or Not. 8:20 a.m. Sunday, 21 August 1995, Longbottom Manor, Bursay, England. The morning tea had been poured and all but drunk, and the bowls of porridge nearly finished before the tapping on the nearby window occurred. It was slightly later than normal, and Neville had begun to wonder when the owl would come. He'd begun dawdling over his porridge, taking the tiniest of mouthfuls at a time. It wasn't that he needed to, or because he wasn't hungry, for he was a couple of hours out working in the greenhouse before breakfast always built up an appetite. No, the reason for his slowness was that owl. His grandmother expected that he would see to it of a morning when he was home from Hogwarts, and until it had arrived and delivered its burden, he wasn't free to leave the table. "Ah, Thedley Prophety's finally here," his grandmother said. "Neville, if you would." Of course, grandmother, he replied as he rose from his chair. He quick-stepped across to the appropriate window before throwing it open. Instantly, the owl hopped inside, eyed him up and down, and promptly raised its foot. Obediently, Neville untied the paper, dropped the appropriate amount of nuts into the leather pouch, offered the owl a treat, and closed the window behind it. "Your paper, grandmother," he said, handing it to her. The instant that he'd retaken his seat, his spoon was scraping the bottom of his bowl, searching out the last morsel of porridge. Quickly, he gulped down the last of his juice and placed the cup back on its saucer. "May I please be excused, grandmother?" he asked. "What are your plans today, Neville?" She asked. Neville blinked at her, but she'd already given permission, albeit the day before yesterday. "I am meeting up with Susan, Hermione, and Hannah," he said. "We're going to Diagon Alley to get our school supplies. Madam Bones is accompanying us, of course. Give my regards to Amelia, won't you?" "Yes, grandmother," Neville replied. A short nod of her head was enough to have Neville bouncing out of his chair. The rustle of the paper barely registered as he crossed the room. "Neville," his grandmother's sharp voice called, stopping him in the doorway. "I think you will want to see this." Obediently and deliberately not saying, Neville reversed course. The newspaper was placed flat on the table, bowl and saucer pushed to one side. His eyes quickly scanned the pages before coming to rest on a long, thin column on the right-hand page. One of Harry's columns, Neville realized, not even realizing that he was smiling. His smile, though, quickly vanished as the animated photograph registered. "What is that?" he asked, revolted. The animal was unlike anything that Neville had ever seen or heard about before. It paced backwards and forwards inside a cage, occasionally showing its long, pointed teeth in what Neville imaged must be a roar. The animal was skeletal thin, and had he leant as close to the paper as he could to be sure webbed feet. Somehow he managed to tear his eyes from it to the headline of Harry's article. "Bunyip, mythical creature no longer mythical creature." Neville blinked. Trust Harry to, once again, do something that ordinary people didn't do. This time, it seemed that he'd discovered a new animal. Quickly, he read through the article, feeling his heartbeat quicken, and his mouth turn dry at the Harry's description of this animal, this bunyip, that had been burrowing into dragons' nests and stealing and eating dragon eggs. The telling of how Harry and the other dragon handlers had caught the bunyip was worthy of something straight out of a Gilderoy Lockhart book. "Grandmother," he asked, daring to be braver even than Harry, "can I have that article? I'd like to take it with me to show the others." Quickly, the page was turned, scanned, and then turned back again. Two quick, low-powered cutters from her wand later, and his grandmother was handing him the article. "What time might I expect you home?" she asked. "I think we're going to have lunch at the Leaky Cauldron," he replied, crossing his fingers behind his back. "Very well," she replied. "Please ensure that you're home well in time for dinner." "Yes, grandmother," he beamed, overjoyed at his good fortune. For some reason that he couldn't understand, his grandmother had started to give him more and more freedoms over the last month. He didn't think that it was because he was now 15. Whatever the reason, there was no way that he was going to do anything to jeopardize it. With the newspaper article clutched tightly in his hand, he quick-stepped across the room. Only when he was sure that his grandmother wouldn't be able to hear him did he race for his room to collect his Gringotts key and moneybag ready for a day of adventure. 0v09, 18 a.m. Sunday, 21 August 1995, Diagon Alley, London, England. "Neville, over here." The shout came from further down the alley and caused him to look ahead. It was the waving arm as much as the bushy head of hair that caught his attention, and Neville grinned and waved back. As he expected, Hermione had beat him there, unexpectedly, though she was standing outside the flourish and Blatz. "Hi, Hermione," he said, reaching her. "I would have thought you'd already be inside getting your books." "Well, I did consider it," she admitted, "but we'd agreed to do our shopping together. And so I waited." He grinned at her, knowing how much it must be killing her to have to wait to do one of her favorite things, looking at, reading, and acquiring new books. "Susan and Hannah aren't here yet?" he asked. Not yet, although I expect them any moment now, she said, peering past him in the direction of the leaky cauldron. You don't get Thedley profit, do you? He asked. She cocked her head at him and blinked, obviously unsure of the relevance of the unexpected question. While I have considered taking out a subscription, no, I currently don't receive it, she replied. I thought so, he nodded. Here, I thought you might be interested in seeing this. Curiously, she took the carefully folded piece of paper and unfolded it. He watched her eyes widen and fix for a second before they started darting back and forth. Oh my, she exclaimed softly. A bunyip. Finally, after what Neville judged as her having read it 2 or maybe 3 times, she looked up at him and handed the newspaper article back. Harry really doesn't do things by half, does he? She asked. A bunyip. I've read about them, of course, but I never expected that they were real. I am just glad it wasn't me who came face to face with one of them, Neville said, shivering at the memory of the picture. Quite, she agreed. Mind you, it does make one wonder what else is out there still to be discovered. The face of the strangest girl in Hogwarts flashed through Neville's mind. She was always talking about strange creatures. Maybe they weren't as fantastical as everyone thought. Before he could dwell on it any longer, the sound of their names being called turned Neville and Hermione's heads. Neville, Hermione, hi Susan, hi Hannah, Hermione replied, waving to them. Neville merely smiled and waited until they joined them before greeting them as well. Madam Bones, it's nice to see you again, Neville added, seeing Susan's aunt approaching. Mr. Longbottom and Miss Granger, it's good to see you both looking well, she replied. My grandmother sends her regards, Neville said, thinking to get that out of the way quickly. He could just imagine the scolding he'd receive if he arrived home and he'd forgotten to pass it along. Madam Bones inclined her head. Please give her mine in return. Have you two seen Thedley Prophet? Hermione asked. You mean Harry's column? Susan asked with a shake of her head. If I didn't know Harry as well as I do, and there wasn't that picture accompanying it, then I am not sure if I would have believed it at all. That thing was ugly, Hannah added, her eyes as wide as saucers, and scary. Well, what can you expect from the boy who lived? Susan asked rhetorically. You know that he doesn't like that name, Neville defended his friend. I know, Neville, I am just teasing, Susan smiled at him. But you must admit that he's doing things and seeing things that no one, not us, not anyone in the world magical or muggle ever dreamed was possible. Magical, maybe, Hermione allowed, but there are quite a number of muggle fiction books and stories that go back centuries that deal with even more fantastical things than even Harry Potter can do. Have either of you heard from him recently? Neville asked. Only through Daphne, Susan grinned. She seems to get quite regular owls from Harry. I wonder why, Hannah laughed. I haven't received anything from him either, Hermione added. What about you, Neville? Have you heard from him? I got a birthday present from him last month, he replied, standing a little straighter than he had been. Some seeds and cuttings from some magical plants in Romania. I am growing them in my greenhouse at home. While I know that the 4 of you have much to catch up, perhaps it can be done while we are shopping. Madam Bones interrupted. I only have until lunch before I must return to work. While buying their school books may have taken care of the larger part of their Hogwarts list, Neville really wasn't sure that it was the smartest idea to go in Tarflowerish and Blatz first. He, however, was overruled. The bookstore always made the purchase of the required school books easy. Shelves dedicated to each year level were laid out near the door, and Neville joined the line with his friends. As soon as he reached the 5th year section, he grabbed the ones for his subjects and turned to leave. That, of course, was never going to happen, not with a Ravenclaw in the mix, and especially with Hermione being that person. Thus, with a sigh, Neville turned back into the shop to peruse the shelves. Flesh-eating trees of the world, the Newt-level course book, caught his eye and he snatched it up, adding it to his pile. His wander through the store's herbology section didn't last long. After all, the library at Longbottom Manor included every book available on the subject, and he himself owned his own copies of the best of them. Rounding the corner, Neville stopped dead. The shelves here had been gutted of books. Most of the shelves were completely empty, and the books that were still stocked looked to be older copies, some with cracked or torn covers. Hermione, he knew, would have a heart attack seeing that. Desperately, he looked up and around, searching for her, and sighed at seeing her bushy head bowed over an open book on the far side of the shop. "You're not wanting a book on dragons, are you?" a voice asked. Neville blinked and turned to see a younger witch with the Flourish and Blitz logo on an apron standing beside him, wringing her hands. No, he replied. "Oh, that's good," she replied. "Just we've out of stock at the moment. Normally, we don't carry all that many, not that's there's a lot of books on the subject in the first place, is there, but of late, we simply can't keep them on the shelves." "Okay," Neville said, not sure why he was being told that. "Of course, it's all down to Harry Potter, isn't it?" She continued, causing Neville to look at her more sharply. "Ever since he went off to work at a dragon reserve of all places, we've had an upswing in sales for books on dragons. It only got worse once he started writing that article of his. Everyone's got to know everything there is about dragons." "Okay," Neville repeated. He himself found the subject interesting, and he was curious, but that had more to do with the fact that Harry was his friend than anything else. Meeting one had nearly had him wetting his pants, and that had been with a dozen dragon keepers standing there, their wands ready and pointing at the dragon that Harry had insisted that Neville simply had to meet after the first task. Yes, that had been more than enough for him. "Thank you very much." "I am guessing you're wanting a book about fantastical magical beasts?" she asked, looking nervously at him. "I think we might have a couple of copies left after this morning's rush." "This morning's rush," Neville repeated, starting to wonder how he could extradite himself from the conversation. "Well, of course. After young Harry Potter's latest article with that bunyip of his, everyone wanted to know everything that there was to know," she relayed. "Oh," Neville said. Thank you, but I am all right." "Well, that's a relief, let me tell you," she said. Just then, a customer across the aisle motioned to her, and she was off. Neville shook his head. He had no idea, and he doubted that Harry had any idea either. Neville wondered whether he should write and tell him. He could see his mate getting a laugh out of hearing what he was doing to book sales. Well, that or shake his head in embarrassment. 0v0, 6:21 p.m. Sunday, 21 August 1995, Dragon Reserve of Great Britain Papa Store, Shetland Islands, Scotland. Angus McNulty stood transfixed as he stared at the retreating figure. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He'd been assured that it couldn't happen. "I guess someone forgo to tell Thar dragons," he muttered. He'd been told that the wards were the best in the business. Muggle repelling, even if they couldn't be unplottable, seeing as they'd had to pay top galleon for the island, including paying the 15 Muggles that lived there to move away. Wizard repelling had been woven in as well, after all, when it came to dragons and the black market that surrounded their parts. It was best to make sure that even magicals stayed out unless invited. The wards themselves had been tied into a series of wardstones that had been dropped into the ocean, just off the coast of the island, to ensure that the dragons could fish if they wanted without being seen or endangered. The fact that the island was positioned on a minor ley line should have greatly increased their power. Nothing was supposed to be able to breach those wards, not without a special key at least. And now this. "Madam Grimblehawk is no gunner like this," he muttered, not for the first time. Angus watched the dragon, a common Welsh green, disappear in the fading light as it beat its mighty wings. The day had been going smashingly as far as Angus was concerned. For the moment, he was the only dragon handler there, and he was kept busy dawn to dusk. His job was simple. For now, at least. Watch the dragons, see how they're settling in, and learn about them. He'd been filling rolls of parchment with notes about each of the 19 common Welsh greens and 23 Hebridean blacks that had been transported to the island so far. He was learning where they were setting up their new homes wares. Angus reminded himself of the word that Potter had introduced to the dragon-keeping profession. He was starting to get an idea of how they interacted with each other. which dragons seemed to get on better together, and which ones had a dislike for other dragons. He was sure that, once other dragon keepers started arriving, and especially when a head dragon keeper was selected, those notes would be invaluable. But if the dragons could simply get up and fly away whenever they felt like it, Angus looked around and up, shielding his eyes against the setting sun as he turned in a complete circle. For now, the skies were clear. Well, clear of dragons at least. This was Scotland, after all. But if one dragon could fly away, then what was to prevent all of them from flying away? Madam Grimblehawk is no gunner like this, he repeated, and then an even more depressing thought occurred. Ark, Merlin be damned, no, there's no other sarding person air. It's me that's gonna have to tell her. Chapter 22. Communication is key. Disclaimer: I solemnly swear that JKR owns everything Harry Potter. Whether or not I am up to no good with her characters is for you to decide. 0v0 Harry Potter. Dragon Whisperer Chapter 22. Communication is key. 9:10 a.m. Monday, 22 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. Half a dozen photos were laid out around him, all with the same subject. Being magical, the angle that they'd been taken from didn't matter so much. After all, the subject did like to prowl around, showing off both sides as well as the view from the front. Unfortunately, those photos also showed that the subject was behind bars, which was not the optimum arrangement for getting a complete, unobstructed view. Thus, Harry was busy sketching. The charcoal moved deftly over the page, capturing in every stroke more and more of not only the look of the bunyip, but also gave strong hints of its essence, its power and savageness. For the most part, he was drawing from memory. The photographs were only there as a guide in case they were needed. His eyes remained fixed on his work, determinedly not on the spot, just 20 meters away where the creature had last been. There was no point looking there now, not unless he wanted to see a scorched piece of dirt and sand-turned glass, and the twisted, melted blob of unrecognizableness sitting in the middle of it. The dragons had been more than reasonable. They'd even given Harry and Newt a couple of extra hours to study the bunyip, but in the end, they'd kept their word. Cantrum and Dankrum, along with the 3 females whose clutches had been stolen by the bunyip, Boolim, Lunsum, and Vestrim, had landed in a circle around the caged bunyip. Dragon handlers had scattered, disappearing as fast as their legs would carry them, until only Harry and Newt had remained. Dankrum had looked at Harry for a long few seconds, and Harry was sure that he was being judged, but Harry knew that this was going to happen, that there was no way to prevent it, and if he was honest with himself, a part of him wanted it to happen, and so he remained perfectly still and just watched. Finally, Dankrum's long neck turned back to the caged bunyip, and then, on some unspoken cue, all 5 of them had sent jets of white-hot tongues of flame at it. The magical protections that had been erected to keep the bunyip in lasted less than a second. The cage and the bunyip itself, not much longer. Once it was done, the 3 mothers, that should have been, raised up onto their back legs, extended their necks to the sky, and roared their anguish and fury and revenge. The sound rocked Harry back on his heels, and as tempting as it was to slam his hands over his ears, he resisted the urge, instead sharing in their grief as best as he could. When they were done, Dankrum inclined his head towards Harry, a gesture that he returned with a bow, before all 5 dragons took to the sky, winging back towards their weirs. A rattle, a bump and thump brought Harry back to the here and now, and he paused in his sketching. The creak of the lid opening had him looking towards the old, tatty brown suitcase laying on the ground not far away. He waited, expectantly, and wasn't disappointed. A head of thinning white hair appeared, quickly accompanied by a hand, and then the old, stooped body of the suitcase's owner. As always, Harry watched, fascinated, as Newt Scamander squeezed himself out of the confines of the suitcase. He shook his head. It looked near impossible that someone as thin as Newt could get in and out of there, and yet Harry had been assured that the opening was quite wide enough to accommodate almost anything. Anything but a dragon, of course. How's everyone down there? Harry asked. All fed and watered, and in the best of health, he replied. You know that niffler of yours nearly escaped again, Harry remarked. I had to conjure some gold coins and throw them back down to keep him inside. Yes, he learnt some bad habits from his grandsire, Newt sighed. I probably should have left him at home with Tina, but I simply couldn't leave him, now could I? The appearance of a black nose sniffing the air above the suitcase had Harry flicking his hand, causing a gust of wind to close the case, causing the hint of Eilpfram the Niffler trying to, once again, escape. He smiled, pleased with the progress of his magic. It wasn't so long ago that he wouldn't have been able to do that. You have made remarkable progress, my boy, Newt remarked, having caught sight of Harry's sketch. Harry gestured for Newt to have a closer look and leant back. He watched as the elder magizoologist peered intently at the sketch of the bunyip, even leaning right in at times. You have a remarkable eye for detail, Newt eventually said. Thanks, Newt, Harry smiled. I am sorry that you had so little time to see it alive. That I was able to, even for only a few hours, was amazing, Newt replied. Now, shall we finish this off together? The next half an hour was spent with the two discussing the bunyip and their observations of it, while Harry added more notes either in his notebook or even around the sketch itself. Both knew that it wasn't complete and that there were probably more unknowns than known facts about the no longer mythical creature. Do you think that there are more out there somewhere? Harry asked. Where there is one, it stands to reason that there are more, Newt replied. The fact that none have been seen in uncounted years until now simply means that they are camouflaged well in their natural habitat. Then it's not likely that we'll ever see another, Harry said, not upset by that fact. The bunyip, the way it looked, and especially the way it could twist and contort its body, had given him more than one nightmare since they'd captured it. He had no doubt that seeing one in the wild would be sure to keep him from sleeping for the rest of his life. I have learnt in my long life never to limit oneself to the likelihood of no, Newt smiled. There are endless possibilities and wonders within this world. It simply remains for us to strive to find them. Harry nodded slowly before looking at the man he considered a mentor shrewdly. You intend to search for more? Indeed, I do, young Harry, Newt laughed. Your friend, Andy Woolulu, has promised to introduce me to a number of Aboriginal elders that remember the stories of the bunyip. With their help, I think it might be possible to find where this remarkable creature has secluded itself. Please be careful, Newt, Harry said. Have no fear for me, Newt replied, laying a hand on Harry's back. If I did something foolish, Tina would be first in line to tear strips from me. It wouldn't be the first time, which might explain why I have remained as thin as I am, eh? Harry laughed along with him before bending back to his sketchpad, determined to create a copy of the drawing that he'd just completed for Newt to take with him. 0v02, 50 p.m. Monday, 22 August 1995, Australasian Dragon Preserve, Australia. Panting, Harry let the sand fall back to the earth and slumped, his hands landing on his knees as he sucked in great lungfuls of air. Most impressive, Cohen stated from across from him. Thanks, Harry managed. The instant that Cohen had heard that Harry'd manipulated the sand when they were setting the trap for the bunyip, he'd asked Harry to demonstrate it. Thus, he had. Not that he particularly liked doing that. Gathering his magic into a ball in his chest was now almost second nature. Letting it out slowly in a trickle to interact with the environment around him came just as easy. But earth, even sand that was so fine and light individually, at least was many thousand times heavier than air and consequently 1,000 times harder to manipulate. At the very least, he'd demonstrated that he could do it. Manipulating the earth is a lot harder than air, he said, voicing his thoughts. For some, for you, yes, Cohen nodded. For others, they find it as easy as breathing and struggle with other elements, like air. Really? Harry asked incredulously. Surely by now you understand that each person has a different connection to the magic that is in the world, Cohen asked. Harry nodded. Yeah, I know. My friend Neville can understand plants better than anyone I've ever met. I think he can get anything to grow. But put him on a broom, and he freaks out, and is more likely to fall off than fly in a straight line. It may be that your friend would find that earth magic comes easily to him, Cohen observed. Maybe, Harry allowed without voicing the thought that they'd never know after all. The things that Harry was learning here weren't taught at Hogwarts or anywhere in Britain, from what Remus had said. What of your fire elemental ability? Have you made any progress? Cohen asked. Harry willed a ball of light into existence between them. There was no heat to it, but that was easy enough to manipulate, and he did so, raising the temperature until he felt it on his face. I know it's not the way that you described, but I can do this without much thought at all, Harry replied. Unconventional, Cohen said, repeating the same thing that he said at their last lesson. But if magic has deemed that you can manipulate the element in this way, then who are we to argue with her? Harry laughed. He'd come to appreciate the way that Cohen talked about magic, as though it wasn't only alive, but had a sentience of its own. He still wasn't sure if he completely agreed with the idea, but he was definitely coming to. Whatever works, right, he said. There are 2 buckets beside that tree. Please bring them here, Cohen said, indicating said tree. Harry eyed the tree, judging the distance. Middling, he decided. Almost too far for him to do it without a wand, but definitely much easier to do with one. Decided, he pulled his rowan and willow wand, gave a simple swish and flick, and directed the buckets through the air to land beside them. Instantly, Cohen took over, wafting his hand from one side to the other, one of the buckets following suit to land opposite its brethren. As you can see, this bucket, Cohen said, indicating the one to Harry's right, is filled with water. The other is empty. We have already ensured that you have touched your magic with the elements of air, fire, and earth. Can you guess what we'll be doing now? Water magic. Harry asked, although he already knew the answer. Swirl the water in a circle around itself, Cohen directed. Please be careful not to spill any. Cohen, much like Professor Flitwick back at Hogwarts, had a very different teaching style. Instead of instructing, he allowed time for Harry to work through the problem himself, only stepping in with a hint or an instruction if it was needed. Harry nodded solemnly as he considered what he had to do. A whirlpool, he decided, like he'd see if he emptied the sink or a bathtub. But there was no drain to pull the water down with gravity. The gravity in this scenario would be his magic. His magic would be needed to push the water, swirling it around in a circle. Well, he could already do the same thing with the air. Decided, Harry checked the ball of magic in his center that he'd been gathering since expending it earlier to move the sand. It wasn't as full as he would have liked. Closing his eyes, he concentrated, searching out the magic in his body, pulling it inward, building it, shaping it. When he was finally satisfied, he opened his eyes once more. Then, tapping into his magic, he released it in a small, steady stream that he directed towards the bucket, over its lip and into the water. It resisted, as he'd expected. After all, water was heavier than air. And then pushed. Slowly, the water began to move. It jostled, sloshed up slightly when he almost lost control, and settled into being nothing more than a choppy mess in a bucket. Harry frowned. That wasn't what he wanted. Yes, he was pushing it, but it wasn't going where he wanted it to. The bucket, that was the key. Channeling his magic once again, he directed it to skim the inside of the bucket. The water moved, creating slight waves. No, he realized. He was only pushing a part off the water. He needed to push all of it. Spreading out his magic, he lined the inside of the bucket and then pushed his magic again. This time, the water moved how he wanted it to. Around and around it went, slow at first and gradually building in speed. The sides rose, the center fell, just like the whirlpool that he'd imagined. Harry grinned and glanced at Cohen to see him smiling as well as nodding. Well done, young Harry, he said. Now take it higher, let the side of the water overflow the bucket, but send it directly up into the air. Harry nodded his understanding and pushed his magic even harder. With the water already moving, it was easy. Slowly the water level rose, reached the lip, and some splashed out. Harry glared at it. He eased off on the speed, considering. The water was going to do that every time it passed the top of the bucket. It was simply what water did. Without a lip suddenly, the answer was obvious. Extending his magic, Harry raised it above the lip of the bucket and pushed some more. This time, no water splashed out. It rose higher and higher until there was more water rab over the bucket than there was inside it. "I am doing it," Harry near shouted. "This is easy." "In that case, young Harry, take the water from that bucket and place it into the other," Cohen instructed. Harry blanched and nearly lost control of the water, managing to catch it before no more than a few drops had fallen. His eyes darted from the water swirling in and above the bucket across to the empty one. How was he supposed to get it over there? He wondered. Without a bucket or a container, the water would simply splash out all over the ground as soon as he even tried to move it out of the bucket. But it already was out of the bucket. He could have kicked himself. Manipulating his magic as though it was a bucket, an enclosed bucket. Once he fashioned his magic both above and below the water as well, he began shifting it. Slowly it rose, past the lip of the bucket, until he could see between the bucket and the swirling water above it. And then, gently, carefully, he pushed his magic, floating it across the intervening space. As soon as he had it hovering above the other bucket, he relaxed, something that he instantly regretted as he lost control of his magic, sending the water plummeting below. And while most landed in the bucket, quite a substantial amount splashed out, onto the ground and up and over both him and Cohen. An impressive first go, Cohen stated, wiping the water from his knees and shirt. "Your instinctive grasp of elemental magic is stronger with water." "Not as strong as with air, but that was way easier than moving sand," Harry nodded. "Shall we try again?" Cohen asked. "Let's see just how much of an affinity you do have with water magic." 0v0, 7:35 p.m. Monday, 22 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. The knock at his door wasn't appreciated. Harry looked up at it, frowned, and promptly ignored it. He was busy. Books, parchment, notepads, and pens littered not only the tiny desk, but also the bed behind him and even the floor. Many were open, and Harry was flitting between each of them and the page he was writing on, trying to condense them into something coherent. Charms was probably his best magical subject, but he knew that he hadn't been putting enough time or effort into his studies as he needed to. Too much jumping around the world from one crisis to another, he grumbled to himself. Not that there really had been a lot, nor was he behind. Well, behind where his tutors thought he should be, but that feeling of needing to catch up persisted. Unsurprising considering that he'd started his magical education over 3 years behind his Hogwarts friends. The knock came again, a little louder and more insistent this time. "Come in," he practically growled. "I know Remus and I call you Pup and Cub, but I never expected you to take on those characteristics," Sirius said as he walked in. "What's up, Sirius?" Harry asked, ignoring the rebuke. "What's all this?" Sirius asked, gesturing to the mess. "I've got a charms essay that's due the day after tomorrow," Harry replied. "No, it's not," Sirius countered before holding up a hand to prevent Harry from talking. "It was due then. You know perfectly well that as soon as this thing with the bunyip came up, you were given an extra week." Harry simply shrugged. Knowing it and accepting it were two very different things as far as he was concerned. "Was there something that I could do for you?" he asked. "I've got a present for you," Sirius grinned, pulling a slim, flat package out of his pocket and holding it out. "But you just gave me a present," Harry reminded him, confused, adding in a look at the shelf above his bed where the magical camera sat. "Well, I've got another present for you," Sirius amended. "Actually, this one's more from Remus. Well, not from Remus. He just reminded me about this, and I had Creature collect it from Grimmauld Place and bring it here." "That really is rather ingenious of you, working out that using house elves in combination with the flu system for international messages is a lot cheaper and faster. Of course, there are faster ways still." Harry cocked his head at the way that his godfather grinned with the last part. If Harry didn't know better, he'd say that Sirius was in the midst of a prank. His eyes shifted to the package in Sirius' hands, and he was suddenly loath to take it. "What's in there?" he asked warily. "Something that I know you're going to want the instant that you see it," Sirius grinned, giving the package an extra shake to emphasize that Harry was supposed to take it. Reluctantly, Harry complied. Whatever was in the plain, brown paper wrapping was hard, but that was all that he could tell. Steeling himself, he carefully undid the tape and unfolded the paper, only to find himself looking back at himself. "A mirror?" he asked dubiously. "Are you trying to tell me that you think that I am vain? That's not just any mirror," Sirius stated. "That was once your dad's mirror. I had its companion. The times we used them, Harry watched him get lost in a memory or three, trying not to let that ache that tended to appear whenever anyone was mentioning his parents without sharing the story with him get to him. Sirius came back to himself with a shake before fixing Harry with a grin. "Who would you most like to talk to?" he asked. "My dad," Harry replied, saying the first name that popped into his head. Sirius winced. "Sorry, pup, I wish that was possible. No, who would you most like to talk to in the entire world right now?" "Daphne," he whispered. "Harry." He blinked, jumped, and nearly dropped the mirror at the unexpected voice. His head shot up and around, looking for the girl that he knew was half a world away. "Daphne?" he asked. "Down here," she laughed, and he looked at the mirror in surprise to see her there, her beautiful blue eyes shining back at him. "How?" he asked, mentally kicking himself. Surely he could speak in more than one-word sentences. "I am not sure," she replied. "A crazy old house elf delivered it last night. The note with it said that it was from your godfather and that I was to be holding it this morning." "Morning?" he asked before giving himself a shake. "Of course, morning. England's what? 10 hours behind the time here in Australia." "Something like that," Daphne replied. "It's good to see you, Harry." "It's great to see you too, Daph," he replied, grinning at her, his eyes drinking in every part of her that he could see. It may have only been a week, but it felt much, much longer. "How are you?" "I am well," she replied, "better now that I can see you and talk to you. Do you know how these mirrors work?" Harry shook his head. "I'll ask Sirius later. What have you been up to? Did you get to stay much longer in Romania?" "A couple of extra days," she replied. "I got to see Ramaranth again before we left, which was nice. Scary as hell, but nice. But what about you? You rushed off around the world so quickly. What's been happening there?" Harry's face fell, and he could see the instant concern in Daphne's eyes. "No, no, nothing's wrong," he quickly reassured her, "at least not anymore." "What happened?" she asked. "Well, as you know, I was asked to come because the dragons here were acting really strangely," he began. What no one knew was that 0v0, 4:50 p.m. Monday, 22 August 1995, just inside the northernmost border of Albania. It had taken some time to travel this far. However, the entity now inhabiting the snake was content to take his time. Care had to be taken, for after all, it was a snake. Humans had two predetermined reactions to this animal: flight or kill. And death, going back to being a disembodied spirit, was not to be tolerated. Care, too, had to be taken with the snake's body. It needed food and rest. The time of year also had to be taken into consideration. It was already late summer, and a tinge of the cold to come was already being teased in the wind very late at night. What was worse was the direction that the being had to travel, north. But north offered hope. North was where a potential for a worthy vessel could be found, and from that body, a powerful body that was eminently suitable for revenge, the ultimate goal of a new body could come about. The memories of the snake that he now inhabited had contained the greatest surprise, one that led to this decision to travel north. The snake had seen and heard a human speaking to a dragon. The fact that the snake had understood both had astonished him, for he had had no idea that his ancestors' unusual gift could be used in such a manner. Unfortunately, the snake's memory wasn't as complete as he would have liked, where the snake had been to have seen this marvel was missing, as was the knowledge of how it gotten from the Rito here. Still, it was enough to formulate this plan, his own knowledge filling in the gap of where to find such a wonderful, potential, unexpected host. The journey, he knew, would be long and difficult, but he had never failed at anything that he'd put his mind to that night, being the only exception and one that he refused to dwell on. One day in the not-so-far future, he would claim that body, and then the world would know his power and his name once more, even if they dared to never speak it. He would show them all. Chapter 23. Mementos of Australia. Disclaimer: I solemnly swear that JKR owns everything Harry Potter. Whether or not I am up to no good with her characters is for you to decide. 0v0 Harry Potter. Dragon Whisperer Chapter 23. Mementos of Australia 6:20 a.m. Tuesday, 23 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. The sunlight glittered on the water as far out as Harry could see. Not even the ever-present waves could stop it, or more likely, they helped the sparkle. An enormous body dove through the air, the sunlight shining off of his pearl-like scales bright enough to cause Harry to squint and throw a hand up in front of his eyes. He watched as Zanzin twisted, folded his wings to his back, and dove into the water with a much smaller splash than would have been expected. Moments later, the great dragon burst from the waves. His mighty wings beat, and he rose high. A twist and flap, a toss of his head, and two fish were thrown high before being gulped down. Watching a dragon's breakfast and swim so early in the morning, the warm breeze ruffling his hair, the sand under his feet, and the ocean before him was something that Harry knew that he was going to greatly miss. Soon, probably much sooner than he wanted, he'd be heading back to Romania. And while the northern country had some wonderful attractions and friends, it wasn't the same. What do you, speaker? Harry looked up at Dankrum, the warrior leader, and held up the piece of eucalypt in his hand. I am carving, he said. The wood in your hand looks like a dragon, Dankrum stated, her jaw resting on the sand so that her great eye didn't tower so far above him. That's what it's supposed to be, Harry grinned at her. I've used my knife to shape the wood into an Antipodean opali. Why? She asked. Harry shrugged. You've seen me paint. This is like that. I find it relaxing, and having the carving is a reminder of my friends. You have other pieces of wood that you've shaped? She asked. A couple of other dragons, as well as a few other animals that I've encountered, a unicorn and a hippogriff, Harry replied. There was no way that he was going to mention the merperson or even the bunyip that he was working on. Dankrum watched him as he turned the piece in his hand, chipping away and shaping it to match what was in his mind. It is not unlike the hidden ones, Dankrum said, and Harry's hands froze even as he turned to her. Hidden ones? He asked carefully. He'd heard the term before. Memzath, the Romanian warrior leader, had said it. Not that he'd explained when Harry had asked what he meant. Dankrum lifted her head, her long neck extending over the sand dune towards the ocean. Harry watched her, waiting, hoping. When there had still been no response after 2 minutes, he went back to his carving. Further out, Zanzin had been joined by another pair of dragons, and he smiled, dividing his attention between the frolicking dragons, the piece of wood in his hands. The hidden ones, Dankrum said unexpectedly, startling Harry so much that he nearly sliced his hand. They are not ones that we generally talk about, even among ourselves. I understand, he said. Dankrum, though not shifting her gaze from the horizon, continued to speak. Two legs know of us, of dragonkind, and of our wares, she said darkly, have managed to find a way to live with two legs, allowing them to believe that they know us and have penned us in. The dragon keepers know better than that, Harry told her. They know that the magic that they place around your wares aren't strong enough to keep you here. They do it more for your safety, so that other two-legs who might want to hurt dragons cannot get to you. Once I would have scoffed at the idea that any could harm a dragon, she said, even for two legs. It takes many working together to harm just one of us. No longer do I think that way. You, speaker for dragons, you have shown us that there are some that can be trusted. The men and women here would never hurt you, Harry said. They grieved with you for the loss of the eggs and were just as angry as you were. This is now known to us, she said, but the one that rises above them is you, speaker. You are rightfully our champion, just as we are yours. You asked about the hidden ones. They are of us, but unknown to Two Legs. Harry gaped at her. Unknown, was she saying? Do you mean, he asked, that you know that they exist is enough, speaker? Ask no more, she said, turning her great head to look at him. I give you my word that no one will ever know what you have told me, Harry promised solemnly. Dragons have named me speaker. I will never betray them in any way. Dankrum bowed her great head to him, her eyes swirling with greens and yellows. Of this, we have no doubt, she said. They sat there in silence, then, the sun slowly rising. Zanzin and the other dragons finished their breakfast, floated in the water for a while, their great eyes shining like beacons just under the waves before eventually lumbering out of the water and onto the beach. Harry and Dankrum remained where they were until Harry had finished his carving and long past time that Harry knew breakfast would have been served. Reluctantly, Harry eventually rose, gave Dankrum a respectful bow, mounted his broom, and flew back to begin his day properly. 0v08, 55 a.m. Tuesday, 23 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. Harry had barely landed before he was captured by a hand landing on his shoulder. Morning, Charlie, Harry said. I was just heading in for some breakfast. He switched his nimbus to his offhand, expecting that Charlie would want to walk with him towards the mess hall. He barely managed a step, though, when he felt that hand on his shoulder pivot him 90 degrees and begin quick-walking him in the wrong direction. Charlie, he asked, gesturing vaguely towards where the tantalizing aroma of bacon and eggs still lingered. For his part, Charlie simply looked down at him and grinned. We've all had breakfast time to work. But I haven't, Harry protested. Well, some of us make sure that we do eat before work instead of going off and playing with the dragons, Charlie stated. I wasn't playing, he protested, looking longingly back at the mess hall that he suspected would remain out of his reach for the next few hours. What were you doing? Charlie asked lightly. I was sitting on the beach talking with Dankrum, Harry replied before adding in response to Charlie's expectant look, and doing some carving. Fishing his latest carving out of his pocket, he held it up to show the dragon keeper. Instantly, Charlie stopped and carefully took the tiny wooden dragon. Harry watched as he almost reverently turned it around in his hands, examining it. This is really good, Harry. An opali. Yeah, Harry nodded. Well, it may not be playing in the traditional sense of the word, but remember who I grew up with. I've seen a lot of different types of play, so there's no pulling the wool over my eyes, he said. With a sigh, Harry took back the carving and let himself be led away. Maybe if he was really lucky, he could snag an early lunch. Found him. Charlie declared a few moments later. Where have you been? Sirius asked, cutting off his conversation with Andy and Remus. Like I said, he was playing with the dragons, Charlie replied for him. Harry started to protest before snapping his jaw shut. There was no way that he was going to win that one. He'd been led to a bluff that overlooked the great sand dunes that formed the preserve and where the dragons all had their wares. It looked peaceful, the golden sand with clumps of grass dotted here and there, sometimes in great lines winding their way across the tops of the dunes and the bright blue, cloudless sky above. A slight shifting off to his right saw a dragon back emerge from the sand where it buried itself before it gave a massive shake before settling back down once again. Harry itched to get a brush or a piece of charcoal in his hand to capture the scene. But that, he knew, would be called playing. Suppressing his sigh, he focused on the men around him. How are our dragons this morning? Andy asked. They're a good, Harry nodded. I think flaming the bunyip yesterday helped to heal them. Mind you, they're still maintaining a wing over Shicklin's weir, just in case of any more trouble. Not that we expect any, Remus stated. No, that bunyip was alone, Andy said. In every story that the elders told, there was only ever one bunyip. A solitary creature, Charlie nodded. Indeed, Andy nodded. In that case, I would say that the job here is done, Charlie stated, causing Harry to start and stare at him. What? He blurted. You knew that this was only a temporary assignment, Harry, Charlie said. But the contract Harry began is for all of the signed dragon reserves around the world Charlie finished for him. That's true. But you know that your primary base is to be the Romanian reserve, especially during your first year where you're still learning the job. Sirius Snort had all of their heads turning to him. What? He asked. You know that Harry's teaching you a Merlin sight more by talking to the dragons than what you lot can teach him. Andy laughed. He does have a point. Don't agree with him too much. He's already got an ego the size of a dragon. He doesn't need it inflated, Remus stated, causing everyone but Sirius to laugh. I am assuming that you want to see Ramaranth and the hatchlings, Charlie asked. Of course, Harry quickly replied. And Memzath and Grulith and all of the others. I wasn't expecting to have to say goodbye to the dragons here so soon. I dare say that Ya'll be back before you know it, Andy said, laying a hand on his shoulder. When do we leave? He asked. We'll take a portkey from here at 4 this afternoon, Charlie said. With the 8-hour time difference, that'll get us there at 8 this morning. Harry nodded, his mind already on getting back to the dragons to say goodbye properly. Just in time for you to have breakfast, Charlie finished, causing Harry to glare at him. 0v0, 12, 05 p.m. Tuesday, 23 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. Harry had packed in what felt like record time. All of his notes about the Antipodean opalies, the bunyip, his painting, sketches and carvings had been secured in his trunk. He'd also done his rounds of the dragon keepers, saying goodbye to each of them. Now, with a sandwich in hand, he was ready to spend the next few hours with the dragons. For some reason that Harry found completely unnecessary and irritating, Charlie had magically stuck a piece of bark to his arm. It's got an alarm charm on it, he was told. As soon as it goes off, you get your ass back here, got it? That portkey will not wait for you. He nodded his agreement, assuring him that he'd even be back before a thing went off, not that Harry completely believed it himself. Nor did Charlie, judging by the look on his face. Mounting his nimbus, Harry took to the sky. As he soared towards the beach, dragon heads lifted towards him, many bugling in greeting, and Harry grinned and waved at them all. Crossing the last sand dune, he swung around to the south, following the coastline. The preserve was big, and just near the southern point, he knew that there was a small inlet that wound its way inland for a number of kilometers. The dragons had avoided building their weirs in that area, thus it wasn't a section that he'd really explored. Time, though, was about to run out. Landing his broom, he took a look around. The banks of the inlet were high, and the water appeared deep, dotted with the occasional log resting on the bottom of it. There were plants in there, too. Water plants which he hoped were magical. Really, he had no way to tell. Still, he knew that Neville would appreciate whatever he managed to collect and send back. It was the thought that counted, right? Kicking off his shoes, Harry waded into the water. Wisps of sand were kicked up, and they obscured his view of the plants that he was aiming for. But only for a couple of seconds. His eyes widened as he saw a dim green glow appear in the swirling water that quickly grew brighter and brighter as the cloudy water cleared. Brilliant, Harry grinned. A water cleaning plant. Judging by its glow, he knew that it had to be magical. Quickly, he bent and began digging into the sand under the water before pulling a plant free. Digging into his pocket as he waded back onto shore, he pulled out a miniature bucket that was quickly resized, before being filled with a layer of sand, the plant, and sea water. The stasis spell was applied using his Rowan and Willow wand to give it added potency for a longer-lasting spell. He was so intent on his task that he was startled when a triplet of dragons crested the bank above him, 2 flying, 1 in a lumbering run, and all 3 flaming. Harry's eyes widened in shock, and he dropped the bucket, even as he stumbled backwards towards the water. A great paw cantrum, Harry belated realized reached down, grabbed his arm and yanked, jerking him off of his feet and up into the air. The snap-off jaws right below his boots had him looking down. Right into a set of jaws full of the sharpest teeth that Harry had ever seen. What the bleeding hell do you think you're doing? He yelled at the crocodile. Instantly, the jaws snapped shut again, only this time, Harry was sure that it was in surprise, more than in an attempt to eat him. His eyes stayed fixed on the crocodile as it dropped back into the water, its powerful tail working to propel it through the water and deep below the surface. "Speaker, are you unharmed?" Cantrum asked as he lowered Harry to the ground. Yeah, I think so," he replied, his legs feeling like jelly. He sat and looked up at Cantrum, Dankrum, and Zanzin. "Thank you, you saved my life." "You are our speaker," Dankrum stated as if saving his life was of no importance. Harry looked back at the water and shivered. That was Merlin be damned close. It took 2 tries before he was settled enough for his magic to grab up the fallen bucket and fly it back into his hand. "Did that crocodile understand me?" he asked, staring at the water where now only a log lay on the bottom. "As it should." "You are a speaker," Cantrum stated. Harry thought about that. Speaker, Parseltongue. When he first heard the term, it meant someone who could talk to snakes. Of course, Ramaranth had proved that it also meant being able to talk to dragons. Snakes and dragons, and now crocodiles. What else? Therial reptiles. He wondered if anyone had ever done a study on it. "What was it you were doing, speaker?" Zanzin asked. Harry looked at the bucket sitting between his legs. "I was collecting a plant for my friend. He replied he really likes plants, and I thought a magical plant from Australia would make a good present for him." Reading dragon expressions wasn't easy, but even Harry could tell that none of them thought that a plant was a good gift for anyone. Neville, though, wasn't a dragon. "Hell like it," he assured the dragons. "Now I just need something for Daphne, Hermione, and Susan. These are more two-leg friends of yours?" Dankrum asked carefully. "Yes, they're a girls. And Daphne is very special to me." He replied, "I know that they'll be disappointed not to meet you. It is rare for us to meet anyone, even others of our own kind," Dankrum stated. Speaking of Daphne gave Harry an idea. He checked his watch, did the time conversion, and winced. He thought that his idea was a good one after all, the way that Shed been with Ramaranth proved it. Surely Shed thinks so too. Decided, Harry pulled the mirror from his pocket. "Daphne," he said. When there was no answer, he tried again. Daphne Greengrass, do you know what time it is?" A grumbling Daphne asked. Her eyes were barely open, and she had the most atrocious head of bed hair that he'd ever seen, not that he'd ever tell her that. "Hi, sorry for waking you," he said. One eye opened, looked at him, and promptly slammed shut. "Where are you?" she asked, her words slurring somewhat. "It's too bright to see. I am still in Australia. At least for a few more hours," he replied. "But before I leave here, I know that you might like to meet some friends of mine." "Friends?" she asked, her eyes opening wide. "Harry, I am still in bed. They're not going to care about that," he laughed. He twisted about then and waved his hand at the mirror, spelling it to float up and away. "Can you see my friends? Is that?" she breathed. Suddenly, the picture in the mirror jostled before settling on an image of Daphne now sitting up in bed, her eyes wide. "Yep," he replied. "This is Dankrum, Cantrum, and Zanzin." "Antipodean Opalize," Daphne said, staring at them. "Can you say hello to them for me?" "Sure," he replied before looking up at his friends. "The person you can see in the mirror is my girlfriend, Daphne. She lives on the other side of the world. She says that it's an honor to meet you and wishes that she was here to do so in person." "The honor is ours, meeting the mate of our speaker," Dankrum said, inclining her great head. "What did she say?" Daphne asked anxiously. "And what did he say?" That seemed a lot of hissing to just to say hello. "I used the appropriate form of introduction," he grinned. "And Dankrum said that it was an honor to meet you." "They're a beautiful," she breathed, a sentiment that Harry immediately passed on. "Your mate is welcome to visit our weir," Cantrum said. "Thank you," Harry replied, "although I am not sure when that will be." "You will be here at the hatching," Dankrum stated, as though it was an irrefutable fact. "Your mate will join you then." Harry blinked and gave the most solemn bow that he could, considering that he was seated on the ground. "It would be our honor," he replied, and turned to the mirror. Daphne, we've both just been invited to the hatching of the dragon eggs in a month or so." She gaped at him, her jaw dropped and her eyes round. "What? Really, we'd love to see that, wouldn't we? That last part sounded a little uncertain to Harry, and he smiled reassuringly at her. Definitely, he nodded. A scratching, tearing sound had Harry turning to see Zanzin pulling at the scales just below his wing. He watched, wide-eyed, as the dragon pulled three loose and dropped them just in front of Harry. Zanzin, he asked. For your mate and your other two-leg friends, Zanzin stated a much better gift thamplance. Harry looked down at the pearlescent scales the size of a dinner plate. Each was slightly concave and shone with the radiance of the reflected sun. Zanzin, that is such a generous gift. I don't know what to say, but on behalf of my mate and my friends, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Harry said, adding in the deepest bow that he could. Harry. What's going on there? Are Thos Dragon's scales? Daphne asked. Yes, they are, he replied. Zanzin has gifted one to you and others for Hermione and Susan. She stared at him, obviously struggling to comprehend the enormity of the gift. To some, those scales would be worth more than their weight in galleons. But he knew that Daphne and Hermione and Susan, once they found out, they'd understand their alworth of them. A dragon's friendship that couldn't be measured on any scale. What about Neville? Daphne asked when she found her voice. Harry held up the bucket. I got him a magical Australian plant. Daphne snorted in a very unladylike way. Yes, much more appropriate. Is there anything that you'd like to ask the dragons? Harry asked her. At first, she stared at him, and he could see her mind spinning at the absurdity of talking to a dragon. But only for a moment. Then the questions came thick and fast, and he was left simply as an interpreter between the dragons and his girlfriend, something that all of them seemed to find fascinating. 0v0, 3, 50 p.m. Tuesday, 23 August 1995, Australasian, Dragon Preserve, Australia. It's been great having you here, mate, Andy said, shaking Harry's hand. I am glad that I could help, he smiled. You know that you're welcome back here anytime, Andy continued. Hopefully next time won't be an emergency. Next month, Harry nodded. What's that pup? Sirius asked. Harry looked at him with a lopsided grin. We'll be back here next month. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate on that, Remus stated mildly. I've been invited back for the hatching, he shrugged. He barely gave them enough time to digest that before he dropped the bombshell. Dankram invited Daphne, too. The dragon leader of this weir invited your girlfriend to come see the hatching of baby dragons. Charlie breathed, having staggered slightly. Yeah, so, Harry asked. Harry, you do understand that dragons don't let Neon, and I mean Neon, not even dragon keepers anywhere near their eggs when they're hatching. Charlie managed to choke out. Harry blinked at him. No, he had no idea that was the case. In the end, he simply shrugged. He was the speaker, and he'd helped save those eggs so that they could hatch. As far as he was concerned, it just felt right that he'd be there to see the happy event. Deciding to change the subject, Harry grasped the piece of eucalypt on the thong around his neck that allowed him to pass through the preserve's wards and started to take it off. Keep it, lad, Andy said. I suspect that you're going to be needing it more than most. Harry nodded at him and let the wood dangle onto his chest once again. Thanks, Andy. See you next month. It's almost time, Remus warned. Everyone grab hold. Instantly, Harry reached in and grabbed the boomerang, his hand between Charlie and Sirius. A few seconds later, a flash of intense blue grabbed them and magicked them away.